It was early morning in the quiet town of Lauranga, Louisiana. Callie Brunette hadn't answered her phone, her car was gone, and no one had seen her or her daughters since the day before. Her father, concerned but not yet alarmed, stopped by her home to check in. What he found inside would mark the beginning of a nightmare. The home was still. Something was very, very wrong. Within minutes, he was on the phone to 911. But by the time deputies arrived, they weren't just searching for a missing person. They were unraveling a horror scene in real time. A young mother gone, 2 children nowhere to be found, and one man's name that would soon spread out across state lines. The Amber Alert would go live before noon, but were they already too late? Callie Jo Brunette had last been seen alive on the evening of Tuesday, June the 11th, 2024. She was taking out the trash. Nothing unusual. Just another night in a quiet trailer that she shared with her 2 daughters, 6-year-old Jaylee and 4-year-old Erin. Her family tried calling her the next day, which was Wednesday, June the 12th, but they didn't hear back. Callie was a loving mom and usually she was responsive, but maybe she was just busy. Maybe she'd nipped out. After all, her car wasn't at the house, so they assumed that she wasn't either. But that night, unease turned into dread. Her phone was switched off. Her social media had gone strangely silent. And then by Thursday morning, her father made a decision to check the home in person. And what he found inside would tear the family's lives apart forever. Inside the home, Callie's body lay on the floor, covered in red. The room showed signs of a struggle. She had defensive wounds, which meant that she had fought back. Police would later confirm that she'd been injured over 50 times. Most of the markings were concentrated on the head, neck, chest, and abdomen. Whoever had done this had done it with rage. But the horror didn't end there, and in a way, this case was only just getting going. Both of Callie's daughters were missing, and so was her black 2012 Chrysler 200. Within just minutes of officers arriving, the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff requested an Amber Alert. The clock was already ticking. At 12:28 p.m., Louisiana State Police released the alert. They named an unknown white male as the person of interest in a DV incident connected to Callie's death. That man would soon be identified as Daniel Wayne Callahan, a 36-year-old with a disturbing past and a far more disturbing plan.
Right now they're gathering, trying to get information. We're assuming about the homicide that took place in and around this area. Again, Callie Brunette was found dead in this home this morning, and right now they're trying to find the location of her 2 daughters, 6-year-old Jaylee and 4-year-old Erin. There are a lot of questions surrounding how she died, the circumstances surrounding it. Right now, they're also searching for, and if you can put up this picture, I'm talking to the folks back at the station here. Take a look at your screen again. They're also trying to find a car. This is Callie Brunette's car. It's a 2012 Chrysler 200 with Louisiana plates 859 GML.
Within hours of discovering Callie's body, the full weight of state and federal law enforcement was mobilized. The Amber Alert described daughters Erin and Jaylee and the missing Chrysler 200, which had Louisiana plates 859 GML. And of course, let's not forget Daniel Callahan. He had a violent history, and he had ties to the Lauranga area. The alert spread across Louisiana and into neighboring Mississippi. Authorities feared the girls could already be across state lines, and it turns out they were right. Law enforcement began tracking cell signals, searching wooded areas, and interviewing anyone who had seen Callie or Callahan in the previous 48 hours. Callie's family told investigators that she had been inconsistent with communication since Tuesday night. Some even received strange messages from her Facebook account. In them, she was asking for money through Cash App. One of those people that received a message was Callahan's own sister, and she quickly realized that something wasn't right. She told the police that the messages seemed like they were in fact coming from Daniel and not Callie. Meanwhile, in Jackson, Mississippi, over 120 miles away, officers responded to a suspicious person call. A man matching Callahan's description had been seen wandering near a wooded area on Bouzier Drive, checking out nearby homes. As officers approached, Callahan took off running. However, he wouldn't get far. Once arrested and in custody, he made a chilling comment: "I'll show you where they are." As news of the case spread, so did a question that would haunt the Brunette family and the Loranger community. How was this man even free in the first place? Daniel Callahan wasn't a ghost in the system. He had a criminal history dating back nearly 2 decades. Most of it was in the Tangipahoa parish. It began in 2006 with a simple burglary charge, for which he got probation, but he violated it almost immediately. In 2008, he was arrested for assaulting a family member, and then again for theft and aggravated battery. That time, he and a relative attacked someone with a mason jar. In 2009, he racked up more charges for burglary, unauthorized entry, and more theft. And again in 2010, though that charge was eventually dropped. By 2014, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison, which included a mandatory rehab. But after his release, there were no serious charges on record, but still his own family had concerns. His sister, Dixie Hemphill, what a cool name, later told reporters that she had warned police about her own brother. She said that Daniel was a mastermind at crime and that he was capable of serious violence. She felt that her real concerns were ignored.
I think he should literally get what he's been asking for. He shouldn't be able to ever hurt another human life, not a grown-up, not a child, not nobody, because he will.
I need someone to take us serious because look what happened. And y'all think, and Lincoln County said there was no merit to him killing anyone. But yet they diagnosed him with seeing hallucinations and being schizophrenic and just let him walk up out of them doors.
But how was Daniel Callahan related to Callie? Well, she had actually known him. In fact, they had dated on and off. She likely knew some of his history, but nobody, not even his own sister, could have imagined exactly what he was planning. Daniel just slipped through the cracks in a devastating manner. After the arrest, officers followed Callahan's directions to a car parked in the woods. Inside that vehicle, they found Jaylee Brunette. Thankfully, she was alive and breathing, but she was injured. She'd been left alone for hours. Authorities rushed her to the hospital. And then came the second location, about 30 yards behind a nearby house. There, in a shallow pit near the edge of the woods, they found Erin Brunette, sadly already gone. She had been suffocated, likely sometime the day before.
There is an overwhelming sense of shock and disbelief in Loranger, a small God-fearing community in rural Tangipahoa Parish.
I've been here 45 years and don't know of anything like this happening ever, especially to a child, but even Callie, she didn't deserve that. No, none of them did.
Callie Brunette was found dead in her home Thursday morning. Her 2 young daughters were abducted and found hours later in Mississippi. 4-year-old Erin was dead. 6-year-old Jaylee, thankfully, still alive.
It really is just crazy that you grow up with somebody and you haven't seen them in a while, and then all of a sudden you see them on the news that they got murdered or hurt really bad, and it's just sad.
We're sad. We never thought that it happened in a community like this, because we're a tight-knit community.
But even in the tightest of communities, sometimes bad things happen.
For us, having children of my own and knowing Callie and her babies, it's a lot. It's hard. It's hard for everybody right now. We're all trying to pull together and be there for them.
In Loranger, everyone knows just about everyone here, but no one appears to have known Daniel Callahan, the man accused of killing Callie and Erin Brunette.
I don't know anything about the man that was there. I've never met him before.
I'm a Christian person, but I know God's got his hands on this, but in my heart, my flesh wants the worst for this man.
The scene devastated even the most hardened investigators. We didn't come to work to see this today. The words of Jackson Police Chief Joseph Wade. He added, "As a father, it was sickening."
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I want to first start by sending my prayers and condolences to the victims and their families of this heinous act of violence here in the city of Jackson. I want to keep all families uplifted in prayer who have been impacted by crime here in the city of Jackson. Crime impacts us all, directly and indirectly. Daniel Callahan and Victoria Cox brought horror and unthinkable terror to the city of Jackson. These individuals were a threat to those kids, which means they were a threat to all of our children. What I saw in the woods in South Jackson is something you never want to see as a chief and as a father. We will hold these individuals accountable. Let me repeat, we will hold these individuals accountable for their actions.
Chief Wade described finding animal cages, wire enclosures, and other signs that the wooded property may have been used for human trafficking. This was a location where something terrible had happened, maybe where other terrible things have happened too, he said. Callahan allegedly confessed to officers immediately, but the details didn't stop coming out there. He also told investigators that he had planned to keep Jaylee alive because he wanted to use her as a slave. None of these were the ramblings of someone confused or unaware. They were cold and deliberate. And just like that, what had started as a missing persons alert was now the worst kind of confirmed tragedy. A mother and her daughter both gone. Another traumatized and injured, but a surviving witness. Daniel Callahan had been caught, and the legal reckoning was only just beginning.
Sharice, yeah, as you said, we are here on Bouger Drive in Jackson, where detectives say they were able to locate the suspect, the victim's car, as well as the two girls who were missing all day. And then again, as you said, tragically, we learned that one of them passed away. Now, this normally would be a quiet, dead-end street, but we've been here since about 6 this evening. It's been anything but. As you can see behind me, it's still a very active scene. The Tangipahoa Sheriff's Office says 35-year-old Callie Burnett was found dead in her Laranger home Thursday morning. Her father came to check on her after the family hadn't heard from Burnett since Tuesday night. When he arrived, his daughter was dead and her car and 2 young children were missing. By Tuesday afternoon, an Amber Alert was issued for Aaron and Jaylee Burnett. U.S. Marshals were able to track the car 2 hours north to Jackson, Mississippi.
There was a suspicious suspect checking houses or whatever, checking doorknobs and stuff like that. So after getting the description of him, there was a marshal or undercover officer in the area that saw this guy, went to apprehend him. He fled. There was a foot pursuit. He was apprehended.
The suspect is 36-year-old Daniel Callahan. And we were told tonight that the grandparents were en route to Jackson to be with the big sister. We were also told by Jackson police that this investigation has been turned over to the FBI, and there are dozens of FBI agents on scene tonight. Reporting live in Jackson, Lily Cummings, WWY.
Not everyone was surprised by what Daniel Callahan had done. In fact, his sister, Dixie, said she had warned the police months earlier. She told reporters that Daniel had a history of escalating violence, that he wasn't just a petty criminal, but that he had dark fantasies, and he made threats that made her fear for anyone close to him. He's smart, she said, too smart for his own good, but he's always been dangerous. And I told someone. Dixie claimed that she reached out to authorities after a disturbing conversation with her brother. She says that he had become obsessed with certain violent ideas, that he was off of his medication, and that he had recently mentioned someone that he wanted to hurt. But she says that the police did not follow up on her concerns. So to her, Daniel wasn't just a monster that came out of nowhere. He was a fuse that had been lit years ago that nobody wanted to put out. And when that flame finally reached the powder, the explosion would take so much with it.
sister of Callie Brunette sat down with me on behalf of the entire family, speaking about the investigation, the outpouring of support, the criminal case against the man accused of killing her sister Callie and Aaron. And she had this message.
Today I am making a statement on behalf of my mom and dad, Tommy and Debbie Brunette, myself and my family. This has been an extremely devastating time for my family. No one could even imagine. We are forever changed in the worst possible way. There is something to be said about a small town. Our community has shown us so much love and support. We feel you grieving with us. No words can express our sincerest thanks to them and to the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Department, the Ronja Fire Department, Louisiana State Police and Crime Lab, Coroner's Office, FBI, MBI, U.S. Marshals, Mississippi State Police, Jackson Police Department, and Baton Children's Hospital. Finally, we would like to thank Harry McNeely Funeral Home, Lance and Erica, for guiding us through this with such thoughtful care of each detail. Lastly, we can't help but wonder if only the Amber Alert had gone out sooner. Could it have been life-saving? We are hopeful changes are made to the Amber Alert process. To the reporters that interviewed that monster and to the station that aired it, shame on you. Shame on you for giving him a platform. Shame on you for making my family suffer even more. Callie and Aaron, we will think of you always and celebrate you often.
There would also be revelations that someone else was involved. When police arrested Victoria Cox on June the 14th, she was found at a motel in Jackson, just miles away from where Erin's body had been recovered. Daniel Callahan had actually picked her up in Amite, Louisiana, shortly after ending Callie. By the time they all arrived in Mississippi, both of the girls were already in the car. Cox told investigators that when she last saw the two girls, they were both still alive. But according to courtroom documents, she did participate in attacks on Jay Lee, and she made no attempt to stop what was happening. She pleaded not guilty to all charges, including capital murder, kidnapping, and sexual battery. But the details in the indictment painted a disturbing picture, and now she's accused of helping Daniel carry out one of the most horrific crimes the Gulf South had seen in decades. Her case is still making its way through the court system in Mississippi, so bear in mind everything I've said is alleged. Who knows, she could be found innocent.
We were in La Ronja all day trying to track down the family of Victoria Cox to learn more about who she is. I did go to her last known address, and that visit was not so pleasant. I spoke to people in this community both on and off camera. They tell me they've seen her around but don't know much about her.
It's just like, how? How could she do that?
As 32-year-old Victoria Cox faces charges in a multi-state murder case, people who live near her home say they are shocked to learn about her alleged role.
We can't believe, all this happened.
Multiple neighbors tell WDSU Cox has lived in La Ronja a long time, and she's a mother of 3 that has been seen several times in the neighborhood.
How can she look at her own babies and then go and hurt someone else's babies like that?
Records show Victoria Cox's last known address is less than a mile from Callie Brunette's home on the same road. Last week, Brunette was found dead and her daughters were abducted before one of them was also killed. I went to that address of Victoria Cox to get answers, but people at the home first said they would not comment. And when the camera began rolling, we're going to get out of here. We're just trying to figure out, is this where Victoria Cox lives?
No, it is not.
It's not. Are you related to Victoria Cox at all? The Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office confirms this home is the only known address for Cox. Some neighbors confirmed details about her, but denied on-camera interviews, fearing retaliation from her family. One neighbor in the area says he doesn't know her, but hearing of a person playing a role in a child's death is unspeakable.
So they went to Mississippi, killed the baby, and I don't even want to hear what they did to the baby.
Neighbors say the death of Kelly and her little girl was already heartbreaking, but learning one of the people that allegedly assisted was living just up the road is something they can't wrap their minds around.
You just can't imagine something like that happening. It's painful, extremely painful.
The Tangipahoa Hope Parish Sheriff's Office tells me prior to this incident, Victoria Cox was only in trouble with the law for a shoplifting case. Reporting in Tangipahoa Hope Parish, Jonah Gilmore.
Within hours of his arrest, Daniel Callahan was booked into the Rankin County Jail in Mississippi. He was held under constant supervision and flagged as a risk to himself. But Daniel made one thing clear. He didn't want to do anything to himself. He wanted the state to do it for him. He said, "For what I did, lethal injection is the easiest thing for me. I would kill me." He waived his rights, spoke openly to investigators, and even gave a televised confession on the way to jail. He told reporters that he had been sober when he did what he did. However, he did still blame Lexapro. He blamed his mental illness and his own lack of self-control.
Question here, why at 6 o'clock? Callahan, do you have anything to say?
I would like to
for that.
Unfortunately, on Lexapro, sober, no in my system, I did.
Why? Why did you kill the girl?
I have no reason for what I did. All I know is I want to say I was sober and only on Lexapro and off Lexapro, and I'm also diagnosed borderline with multiple personality disorder, and I have not got to talk to a lawyer, and I'm also watch, but I'm not entitled. But I think it was the side effects of the Lexapro.
Did you kill her mom?
His mom.
Aaron's mom.
I'm at Rankin County Jail if y'all would like an interview.
Do you regret what you did?
Completely.
You regret what you did?
I would kill me, and I have told them everything that I did, and I have agreed to not fight it, speedy trial, and whatever it is.
You hope for the death penalty?
For what I did, lethal injection is the easiest thing for me.
Are you pretending to be crazy?
Oh, I'm not pretending to be crazy. Look me up in Region 8, borderline multiple personality disorder. You better look it up.
So you have no...
Crazy. I'm certified. I was only at the nut house 2 weeks now.
In his first interview, he described multiple sharp impacts to Callie inside her Loranga home. He said it was something he had wanted to do for a while. He also admitted to stealing her car, disposing of her phone, and driving both of her children across state lines. He says that in Amite, Louisiana, he picked up his alleged accomplice, Victoria Cox, who at the time was 32, and whom he had recently been in a relationship with. Together, they drove the children to a house in Jackson, Mississippi, where prosecutors alleged that both of the adults carried out a violation. At some point around that time, Daniel ended Erin's time on this earth, and then he left her in the woods.
You might say it's the saddest of all situations. And we're here today to do what we can do as far as defending Mr. Callahan.
The crimes literally rocked the small town. Monday, Tangi officials announced Callahan will also be charged for his role in an unrelated simple arson that occurred at a shed in a meat and separate burglary incident.
As a resident of the area, as a father, and as a concerned citizen, my first reaction, was, well, my hearts go out to the family.
Prosecutors say given the extent of the crimes, the brutal murders that span 2 states, seeking the death penalty is most appropriate.
The crime has been reported extensively with the facts. I certainly don't want to get into that again, but we felt like it was an appropriate case for eventually for a jury to consider capital punishment.
On June 21st, just over a week after the murders, a grand jury in Tangipahoa Parish indicted Daniel Callahan and Victoria Cox on multiple charges: first-degree murder, 2 counts, aggravated kidnapping, second-degree kidnapping, and armed robbery. Mississippi quickly followed, charging both with capital murder, sexual battery, and kidnapping. And then came the federal charges, the most serious of all. Daniel was indicted for kidnapping resulting in death, and transportation of a minor with intent to engage in sexual activity. Both carry a mandatory life sentence or death. But in August, Daniel pleaded guilty in federal court. In exchange, prosecutors agreed not to seek the death penalty. He accepted a minimum life sentence and agreed to not appeal. Even so, state prosecutors in Louisiana and Mississippi are still pursuing the death penalty. Federal prison will come last. The states want their turn first. In the weeks after the murders and the attacks, Callie and Erin were laid to rest in a private service in Loranger. The family asked for privacy. They also released a statement through Callie's sister, Brandy. It said, "We are devastated. Our only focus now is raising Jaylee in a home full of safety and love." A GoFundMe was created to support her care and to help the Brunette family navigate what lies ahead. A trust has been set up in Jaylee's name. When Daniel Callahan appeared in court and pleaded guilty, the judge took a moment to thank the family. They had agreed to the plea deal. They just wanted some finality. Daniel Callahan should be sentenced to life in federal prison this November, and before that he'll face the Louisiana and Mississippi charges, where he could face capital punishment. It seems that justice is coming, but for the Brunette family, the damage is already done. The bell rings, small footsteps scatter. A 5-year-old scans the pavement for her mother's face. It does not appear. Teachers make calls to try and track her down, but they get no answer. Friends try and then family too, but still nothing. By dusk, the child has been collected by family, but in her mother's bungalow, the lights are off. A mug of tea is now cold, and strangely, the dogs are fed. The whole place looks neat, but maybe too neat. This one sounds like a movie plot. Here we go. To her friends, Georgina was two people. There was the girl who doted on her daughter, who laughed at spa days, who posed in selfies with cocktails and friends. And then there was the girl that they called George. She was the dancer, the escort, and the woman who lived in a bungalow on the grounds of a castle rent-free, with her bills paid and her cars, plural, paid for too. She was barely into her 20s when she first stepped into the world of high-end escorting. At first, it was all glamour and glitz, burlesque performances, photo shoots, cash-in-hand work. But behind this glitz and glamour came a pressure. Sadly, she lost a boyfriend by his own hand, which was followed by her father's passing only months later. Friends said that it was at this time that she turned to alcohol, as well as illicit substances. Probably due to these substances, she started having mood swings. She told some that she blamed her benefactor for what had happened. She told others that she was simply tired of the arrangement. However, this arrangement paid, and it paid well. In fact, up to £10,000 a month. But this was a salary that came with strings attached. However, Georgina would just cut those strings whenever she fancied it. There was flirtations with other men, talk of returning to London to work again, and new plans that she whispered about on the phone. She no longer wanted this life where she was exclusive to one client. She believed that she could play both sides, that she could keep the gifts and the home, but still chase her own life too. However, through all of her plots and planning, someone was always listening. And it wasn't her friends nor her family, it was someone else entirely. Hidden inside a plug socket in her bungalow was a device nicknamed Isabel. It wasn't decorative, nor did it serve any purpose for Georgina. However, it was a surveillance device, and whoever had planted it had called it hundreds of times, which meant that there were hours upon hours of Georgina's life that had been fed directly into another room, into another mind already teetering between love, control, and something far darker. Georgina was never short of admirers in her life. Some were fleeting, some were dangerous. There was Peter Deem, the on-again, off-again boyfriend, who had been part of her life for years. Peter was the man that, when he passed in 2015, left Georgina spiraling downwards. That's when she started drinking and using more. Her friends said that she raged at those around her, searching for somebody to blame. There was also another man, Tom Ballinger. He was a married man that she'd met at a wake. They began texting within days, and soon they were lovers too. She told Tom openly that she would leave her wealthy benefactor, but only once that the bungalow, her home on the castle grounds, was signed over to her. She believed that that would be her ticket to start afresh. And then there was, in some ways, the main man, the man that her friends called Rich Pete. He was older, quiet, the man that paid her bills, her rent, and her salary. Georgina's mother said that her daughter believed that she could ruin him, that she knew his secrets, that she had photos, and that she held power over him. And to Georgina, each man in her life filled a different role. So to outsiders, it looked like she was juggling all of them at once. But these overlaps created pressure. There was jealousy here, resentment there, but there was always the same thread throughout all of them, and that was money. By January of 2016, Georgina was promising one man that she'd leave another. She was teasing a real future with Tom. She was confiding bitterness with her friends and casually threatening to fleece Pete. However, Rich Pete was listening in. Everyone thought that Georgina was thriving. There was the BMW, the Range Rover, the spa weekends, the helicopter rides. She even had liposuction fully paid for. Then there was the bungalow in the shadow of a castle that she was living in rent-free. So this was no ordinary escort arrangement. This was a contract of exclusivity, and it was a lucrative one. £7,000 one month, £10,000 the next, all paid for by Rich Pete. He was wealthy, meticulous, and proud of his fortune. He saw it as an agreement, a contract that should be honoured, that Georgina would be with him and no one else, that she would simply enjoy the lifestyle, and he would enjoy her company. But Georgina didn't live by contracts. She lived in bursts and excitement, in moments of affection, but then venom. Her mother described her behaviour as cruel at times. She said that she wanted to hurt him. She said to make him feel pain. But still the money flowed, still the cars arrived, and still she stayed in the bungalow that she was claiming as her own. And then the whispers of blackmail began. She told her friends that she could end it all with a single message. She said that she had information about his finances, about some hidden cash, even his tax dealings, and add that to the photos that she had of him. She believed that she held some real power, and with her friends she would openly laugh about this. She was heard saying that she would rinse Rich Pete, and then start afresh in London. But whereas Georgina thought she'd built a case against Rich Pete was building his own case against Georgina. All of her covert confessions that she'd made in her home had been recorded and listened to time and time again by Pete, so the scales of power were tipping back and forth. But Rich Pete was not about to let this slide. And it was that white plastic adapter, one of a dozen in Georgina's home, that actually hid a SIM card and a microphone. This meant that wherever Rich Pete was in the world, he could dial in and see what was going on in the bungalow. And he didn't just do this once or twice. He did it 514 times over the span of 10 weeks. That meant hours upon hours of audio streamed from that home. Conversations with friends, her laughter with the other men, her complaints about Rich Pete, and her plans of blackmail. Sometimes she even spoke like she was rehearsing what she was going to say to him. Others like she was celebrating something she hadn't yet won. Once the bungalow's mine, I'm gone. I'll fleece him. I'll do him over. All of this was collected and catalogued and poured into Rich Pete's ears. And with this proof of her lying, proof of her cheating, and proof that she was planning to leave, things were about to get much darker, until one night in January, when the voice on the other end said just enough to push its listener to make a list that wasn't about dinner or work or chores, something much darker. Now, Georgina had used leverage or blackmail on people before. She'd used photos and videos. She'd used secrets that people had shared with her, all to get what she wanted, and it worked. Wealthy men had paid her to keep their reputations clean. She told friends that it was a simple plan, and that if one man wouldn't pay up, she'd just move on to the next. She even boasted that she extorted one man's entire life savings. But now she had something even better. She had someone far richer and far more generous than anyone she'd ever met before. And now she had a ton of evidence against him and she wasn't afraid to use it. So with her exit plan in place, what would happen next? Our smartphones track us much more than most of us realise. Even when the screen is off, they still send out a whisper of data, a ping to a tower, a breadcrumb here, another there. And in this case, investigators followed those crumbs around South Wales until that trail pulled near a quiet farm track, a farmhouse, large sheds, and tucked by a wall, a white luxury SUV. Sleek, expensive, and nothing unusual if you don't look twice. The farmhouse owner, Peter Morgan, aka Rich Pete, is calm. He's polite, helpful, he offers to make tea. He's the kind of person who knows where every tool is, who labels boxes, who keeps immaculate schedules. When he was asked about Georgina, of course, I know who you mean. Consent to search is given. The SUV opens in a soft chirp. Under the driver's seat, wrapped in a shadow realm where dropped fries and loose change lives, officers found a phone, and that phone was Georgina's. Peter explains it away. He said that he took it off her to keep her from taking substances, and that he meant to give it back. It sounds considerate, but it also sounds rehearsed. While one team logs the device, another checks the bungalow again. They photograph the adapter that isn't an adapter. Inside is the SIM card and a hidden microphone. It is Isabel. Peter Morgan was born into wealth, but not into an easy life. He grew up on a 300-acre farm near Usk, the son of a respected Welsh farming family. By 10, he was already driving tractors and motorbikes, and he was more at home with machines than many people. And that trait, an obsession with engines, cranes and tanks, never left him. He would later line his farmhouse with weapons and vehicles like trophies. He was a collector and an enthusiast. In adulthood, he built on his fortune. Property development made him worth around £20 million. He married wife Helen, raised 2 daughters, and for more than 2 decades, he lived the life of a family man. But beneath that image, he was growing restless. In 2011, nearing his 50th birthday, Morgan began seeing escorts. What started as a midlife distraction quickly became a routine. He later told doctors that once he learned how to use an iPhone, it opened the world of escort websites, and then he just never looked back. In 2012, he met Georgina Simmons, and unlike the others, he kept on seeing her. She was young, glamorous, and he liked her company. But even then, he still continued to visit other escorts too. By 2015, wife Helen discovered the truth. Not just of the money that he'd spent, but also the fact that escorts had been to their marital home. And so that marriage collapsed after 23 years. Peter then leaned more heavily on Georgina. It was then that he agreed to pay her up to £10,000 a month to be exclusive to him. He moved her into a bungalow at Pengoeg Castle, one of his properties, and he pretty much gave her everything that she asked for. He told people that he loved her. He told experts that she was like a best friend. And he also admitted that he knew the truth. If the money ever stopped, that she would leave. So he kept on paying, month after month, until the money was no longer enough to hold her. Back at the farm, the man remains steady. He answers every question. He does not ask for a lawyer.
The only thing we're struggling with at the moment, we can't account where she is.
No.
And you've taken her only method of contact.
I know, but I don't know. I thought she'd have just gone in and picked up.
Where do we think she was going at 12 o'clock?
Didn't say. She didn't say. She just wanted me gone by 12. I don't know whether she was off out or whether somebody was coming in.
He says that he just wants to help. He reaches into his pocket and places keys on the table. Metal jingles and clinks as he puts them down. He gestures to the outbuildings. You'll need these for one of the sheds, he says. An outhouse, really. Sometimes things aren't as they appear, and somewhere between the tidy bungalow and this immaculate farm, the fact is a mother has not come home. But police are getting ever closer to finding out exactly what happened. A small group of officers walk the gravel path towards the sheds. It's eerily quiet, with moisture gently settling on the corrugated roofs. They try the first door, gardening tools. The next, paint tins, spades. And then the third, a lock clicks open. Inside, the air is colder and sharper. Stacks of equipment line the walls, but something else pulls the eye of the detectives. Plastic, a long bundle wrapped tight. It's neat and deliberate. One officer crouches, a gloved hand brushing the sheet. He makes a small incision. The plastic parts just enough to reveal skin. It reveals feet. It reveals Georgina Simmons. Georgina was 25 years old. She was the mother of that little girl that was waiting at the school gates. But this discovery doesn't bring any answers, only more questions. Who left her there? Who had the patience to bind her, wrap her, and store her in silence? Back at the farmhouse, the man remains calm. There was no flinching when they tell him where she'd been found. Instead, he tilts his head and says quietly, "I strangled her this morning." When the case finally reached trial, the defense leaned on psychology. They said that Peter Morgan, aka Rich Pete, the man accused of Georgina's ending, wasn't acting out of cruelty. They said that he suffered from Asperger's syndrome. Doctors explained how that condition can mean strict black and white thinking, how sudden change can feel unbearable, and how someone with that condition may crave routine, precision, and even control. One psychiatrist testified that he believed the diagnosis explained a lot about this case, about why the accused spent his life fixing machines instead of making friends, about why he obsessed over tanks, cranes, and military history, and why he planted a device like Isabel, the spy plug, and then called it hundreds of times, collecting data as if it were notes in a manual. They argued that when Georgina threatened him with blackmail, he didn't see any other option. He saw a corner that he couldn't escape from. However, prosecutors pushed back. They said that this wasn't impulse, that this wasn't confusion, and they pointed to the planning. They pointed to the list. On it was duct tape, plastic sheeting, and baling twine. Every item was prepared before he even set foot in the bungalow. So whatever his diagnosis, they said, he knew exactly what he was doing. At 3:20 in the morning, a note appeared in his phone. SIM, gloves, snip, handle, tape, adapter. To investigators and to anyone that watches true crime, it was chilling. It was a checklist. Gloves to avoid prints, tape to silence, bind or seal, plastic to wrap, twine to restrict or throttle. Earlier on, he'd been listening to Georgina through Isabel. He heard her say that she would fleece him, that she would leave him and then start again with another man. And by dawn, the plan was fixed. Later that morning, he drove to the bungalow where Georgina lived. The very same bungalow that he had once promised to sign over to her. The same one where she was already plotting her future without him. She let him in, they talked, they argued. But Peter had a plan, and he wasn't improvising. The list was in his pocket, the twine was ready. He'd even thought about how he'd move her afterwards. He'd brought a metal pole to use as a lever. Most people see their home as a safe space, but for Georgina, that January morning, her home had become both the bait and the trap. And once that twine was pulled tight, there was no way out. In court, the details finally surfaced. Peter didn't rush her, he didn't lash out. He had knotted loops in the baling twine so his hands could stay free. He thought it through down to every angle. He placed the cord around her neck, pulled and then loosened. He told jurors that he wanted to frighten her, not to end her. That if she'd have just backed down, he'd have stopped. But Georgina didn't back down. Even as the pressure lifted, she told him, "You're going to pay for this." And that was the moment that Peter decided to pull once again, this time harder until she fell still. When it was all over, he fed her 3 Jack Russells. He washed the dishes. He even took out the rubbish. Only then did he wrap her in polythene, bind her with tape, and slide the bundle into his car. He drove to the farm outbuildings. He hid her among tools and machines, and then returned to his routine. He went to the bank, a building site, everyday errands as if nothing had happened. It wasn't until later that afternoon, when he heard Georgina's daughter had been picked up from school, that reality really sank in. He had done this to the woman that he claimed to love, and yet when he spoke to detectives, he did so without tremor and without tears. "I'd done it," he simply said.
Well, I had the intention to kill her, didn't I? But I didn't.
Okay.
But so if she'd have been worried and said, "Oh no, I won't do it," and all, I'd have been okay with it. But you know, the trouble was once I sort of attempted to murder her, I'd been in a hell of a lot of trouble for that, and she could have still gone on and blackmailed me, couldn't she?
The trial lasted 3 weeks. Jurors heard every side. The threats that Georgina had made, the listening device hidden in her home, the plans, the lists, the twine, the confession that came without a hesitation. The defense still argued diminished responsibility, that it was the Asperger's that had clouded his judgment, narrowed his vision, and trapped him in a world of absolutes. But the jury saw something else. They saw preparation, control, and choice. He was found guilty of murder. At sentencing, the judge called it what it was: cold, planned, and executed not in a frenzy, but in anger and fear. He was given life in prison. He must serve at least 25 years before the possibility of parole.
The death of my daughter, Georgina Simmons, has been a devastating tragedy for the whole of our family. Her beautiful daughter has been left without a mum. Georgina has left a hole in our lives that will never be repaired. All of our happy memories will be kept forever in our hearts. We respect the decision of the jury, and the sentence has been handed to Peter Morgan, but this will never compensate for our loss.
For Georgina's family, it was no victory. Her mother spoke of the devastation, of her daughter gone, of a little girl left without her mother. No sentence could repair that hole, she said. The absence would remain, and so it does.
I just wanted to let everyone know that I appreciate all your prayers and all your thoughts and everything that, those of you that have sent messages to me, and especially messages on the site. And I know this is going to be really hard for some people, but I need to let you know that they did find her. And she's now with the Lord. She's not with us anymore. I had a feeling about this before. Maybe God put it on my heart, prepared me for it. I don't know. But it was not an accidental thing. I'm just going to tell you that. Somebody did this to her, and the police are working on it right now.
Chelsea Lee Gauthier grew up in Abbotsford, British Columbia. To her family, Chelsea wasn't just another name in a video like this. She was their light and their life. Her father, Ray, raised her as a single dad. He often speaks about how close they were, how she had a goofy, fun-loving personality, and how she could really make anyone laugh. She didn't have a mean bone in her body, he said. She loved helping people. She was caring, loving, beautiful, and she loved animals.
So this very, very first clip I'm going to share with you is kind of a preamble of an ad that I was going to do with Chelsea. And a little bit of goofing around, having a little bit of fun. You'll hear Carrie Ann in the background. And of her just kind of warming up on the mic, and it's kind of fun.
Hi, my name's Chelsea, and I have a cat and iguana, and I love them. And yeah,
say something like
my dad does radio productions, whatever how heck you say that.
Productions.
Productions. There you go.
Ray was actually a grandfather, as Chelsea had 2 young daughters of her own too. They were just toddlers when she disappeared. Family members say that being a mother was the most important role in her life. She was protective, affectionate, And even at just 22 years old, she carried the weight of providing for her girls with real determination. Her brother Jeremiah described her as his best friend. When I couldn't say much to my parents or anyone else, I could talk to her about anything, he said. Their bond seemed unshakable. Things weren't always easy, but when she struggled, Chelsea tried to stay bubbly for everyone else. Her cousin Amanda later recalled, she was lively, she was bubbly. Even when she was down, she would always try and help others. I also want to mention that Chelsea has been identified as an Indigenous person, something that should not be ignored about this case.
There's a cat, by the
Pussy's
way.
on the way. Hey guys, I'm Tyler.
With the cat. Say hi. Anyways, continue.
I did some digging and found out that Chelsea actually used to have a YouTube channel, and she had it with someone called Angel. I think they share the same last name judging by the channel name, so I'm guessing the two of them are related, but I'm not 100% sure. I did a little more digging, and in the intro to their first video on that channel, it looks like their channel was originally called Crackerjack and Psycho. And I believe that crackerjack is actually a strain of a certain plant, and that looks like the nickname that Chelsea is using. And, well, look at Chelsea in a still image from that intro, and it all kind of adds up. She also mentions Stoner Wednesdays in the video, and also talks about doing illicit substances in a jokey way, so yeah. And you might be thinking, what does that have to do with anything? I'm just going to say that it does tie into this case as it progresses, because I believe it could point towards Chelsea being a green enjoyer. And this means that if someone had access to a lot of it, they could possibly have the power of persuasion over her. And also want to just add that I'm not saying that jazz cabbage is bad. And if you consume it, it doesn't make you bad at all. I genuinely don't care. I just thought that all of this was an interesting insight into the case that I've pieced together. And I haven't seen it mentioned anywhere else in the coverage, not that there really is any. Friends remember Chelsea as being adventurous, sometimes impulsive, but always loyal. They say that she wasn't afraid of hard work. So when someone asked for help, she showed up for them. And that included the day that she agreed to trim some plants for an acquaintance. And when I'm talking about plants, yes, I mean plants, that kind of plant. In fact, we're talking about Satan's salad, the one that'll toss your brain. I just made that analogy up, not bad. Copyright Dark Case 2025. This job was situated at an illegal grow operation when it was located in the rural forests outside of Mission. This decision would bring her into contact with a new world of people, and namely someone who lived on the edges of legality and secrecy. This was a world that Chelsea did not belong in. She couldn't have known how dangerous this new connection would become. Father Ray later admitted that he wished that he could have stopped her. He said, if she was not doing that, she was not with those people involved with this, she will be standing with us right now. I believe that this is one of those choices that seemed small at the time, but in the end it changed everything. Because when she went there, Chelsea never came home. Instead, her family would be left searching, first with hope, and then with growing dread. And of course, things would only get worse, and her family would be left with a devastating heartbreak. However, in the days before her disappearance, Chelsea was still just Chelsea. She was a young mother, a sister, a friend, a daughter who ended every phone call with her dad by simply saying, I love you. No one could have known that those would be the last words that he would ever hear from his daughter. Abbotsford sits in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, just over an hour's drive from Vancouver. It feels both close to the city and far enough away to be its own world. It's surrounded by farmland, rolling fields of corn, blueberry farms, as well as dairy barns that stretch across the landscape. But beyond those fields, the mountains rise quickly, and then the forest takes over. Those areas are dense and remote, the kind of place where someone can disappear. Abbotsford is often called the city in the country. It has a reputation for community spirit, for family neighbourhoods, for schools and churches at the heart of town. But like many large growing communities, it also has its struggles, namely due to illicit substances and everything that comes with them. These mean that local youths get drawn into dangerous circles, and it's not unusual for crime to spill over from nearby large cities. For Chelsea, Abbotsford was her home. It's where she grew up. It's where she raised her 2 little girls. It's where her friends remembered her laughter as it echoed in backyards and schoolyards, before she stepped into a car that would drive her out of the familiar streets of Abbotsford and into the woods near Mission, where she would never return. This backdrop matters because Abbotsford is a kind of place where a disappearance shakes everyone, where neighbours stop and talk about it at the grocery store, where green ribbons suddenly appeared, pinned to shirts and backpacks. This story wasn't just one family's tragedy, it became Abbotsford's tragedy too. The last confirmed sighting of Chelsea was on July the 27th, 2017. That morning, she was seen at a McDonald's in Abbotsford, where witnesses noticed that she wasn't alone. She was with 2 men. One of them was older, in fact, decades older than Chelsea. The other man was his associate, and we will hear from him later. From that McDonald's parking lot, Chelsea climbed into their vehicle. Their destination was a forested backroads near Mission. This was a hidden grow operation tucked deep into the trees. Chelsea had agreed to help him trim the plants, and it was supposed to just be simple work. A few hours and then home once again. But once she left Abbotsford that day, she would never return. By July the 30th, just 3 days later, alarm bells were ringing, and they were ringing loud. Chelsea's family reported her missing to the Abbotsford Police Department. For those who knew her, the silence was terrifying. Chelsea was always in contact with friends and family. She never stayed offline for long. And most important of all, she would never ever abandon her 2 little girls. Everyone knew that something was very, very wrong. When investigators spoke to the older man that picked her up, his story was shaky. First, he claimed that Chelsea had gotten scared in the night, that she thought there were bears nearby, and for some reason that meant that she had hitchhiked home alone. However, no one else had seen her since that morning. And then later, his story changed once again. This time he said that she had left with a boyfriend and another person. The contradictions were glaring, but one thing stayed constant throughout it all. Chelsea was gone, and now her family were desperate for answers. Friends and relatives organised searches. They scoured Abbotsford and Mission. They handed out posters. They shared her face across social media. Her father Ray took to YouTube. He posted video updates about his daughter. He begged for Chelsea's safe return. In one, his voice cracked as he recalled their final exchange. She said, "I love you," and I said, "I love you too," and that was it. For nearly 3 weeks, the family lived in limbo, but still clinging on to hope. They had no idea that Chelsea's body already lay hidden in a shallow grave deep in the woods. On August 16th, 2017, nearly 3 weeks after Chelsea was last seen, investigators returned to the backroads northeast of Mission, namely Sylvester Road and Dale Road, a stretch of rural land where thick forest swallows the sound of passing cars. It was the kind of place where secrets could stay hidden for a long time, perhaps forever.
I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about Chelsea. She had a very big heart. She loved crows, happy faces. One time I took her to Calgary on a road trip with me because I'm a truck driver. She really liked the magpies. One time I taught her how to drink chocolate milk. I told her, open it up and drink it down as fast as you can. That's the best way to drink chocolate milk. She used to love hamburgers. She loved going to get hamburgers. She was very, very, very much into photography. She loved to take pictures, and she was so good at it. She was really amazing at makeup. She was an artist. She was also very, very artistic, a lot like her sister Carrie, which I love very much. Carrie, I love you. I can't really mention much about the investigation because the investigators that I hit. I am respecting what they're doing, and if anyone has any questions regarding the investigation, they are to contact them. But the reason why I'm making this video is to thank all of you for being so kind. I will probably have more to say later. Except my storage locker in Aldergrove, I have a lot of snowmen that I used to give her. Every year I used to get her a snowman. I'm so grateful I have all of that stuff. Chelsea was an amazing girl. She loved so many people. She was fun. She loved to laugh. She was so gifted. And this is an absolute tragedy. But I am so confident that the police are going to do a phenomenal job on getting to the bottom of this. Again, I say it so strongly, please keep an eye on what your kids are doing. Bring awareness and addiction awareness to them and let them know. Because you could be in this predicament tomorrow. No, she did not pass away from a car accident. It was because she was involved with it that her life was taken from her. Please, 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 keep an eye on your kids. Their social media, the things they do, the people they hang out with, their phones, monitor their phones. It's not an invasion of privacy. You are their parent. It is your right to protect your child. Protect your child, for the love of God. I could never want this to ever happen to anyone. Until next time, until we talk again, God bless all of you and your children and your family. In the name of Yeshua.
Police had already conducted a cursory search of the property, but this time they looked a little deeper, and this time they found what they feared the most. In a shallow grave near a tent was Chelsea Gauthier. She was wrapped in a sheet, shrouded by the soil of the same wooded property that she had travelled to earlier that day. The discovery confirmed what her family had already begun to sense. Chelsea was never coming home. Her daughters would never see their mother again. At a press conference, Corporal Frank Jang faced the cameras. From the evidence collected so far, investigators believe that Miss Gauthier's death was not random. This case was now officially a homicide. Investigators appealed to anyone that might have seen Chelsea any time in the final days of July to come forward. In the early days of the operation, police did not release her cause of death, and forensics was still underway. But behind closed doors, the autopsy told the truth. Chelsea's time on this earth had been ended from a sharp force strike to her back. It was sudden, and it was fatal. Investigators could now see that this was no accident. For the Gauthier family, the news shattered them. Ray recalled the moment that he walked into a police station looking for answers. Detectives told him that his daughter had been found. And here he is from his own YouTube channel, talking about his thoughts and feelings at that time.
But I appreciated all your prayers, and I want you guys to know too that God did not hear, it's not that he didn't hear your prayer. I think God was saving her from a very rough life that she had ahead of her. He knows what he's doing. I've had my moments where I've gotten upset with God, but I do know one thing. He has her, and I'll see her again.
And as we can see, there's grief, but there's also determination. Determination for justice, and for Chelsea to not be forgotten. In his eyes, it was the green and the world that surrounds it that had drawn his daughter into danger. And I guess that touches onto the whole argument surrounding legalization.
And for those of you that do smoke this garbage, I hope this is a wake-up call for you to stay away from that crap. And I know a lot of people say, well, it's good for medicinal value and this. Yeah, sure, yeah. It's absolutely no good. Maybe in tablet form for people and need pain relief. But I'll tell you one thing right now. Our country is thinking about legalizing that garbage. And I'll tell you one thing, I'm going to do my very best to stop it. There's nothing good about it.
The community stepped in to support the family. A GoFundMe raised money for the funeral. Messages poured in from across Canada. Somebody wrote, "May her memory be eternal." Another said, "I only met Chelsea once, but she struck me as very good-natured. May she rest in peace." Others simply said, "R.I.P. sweet angel." Vigils were held. Friends and family wore green ribbons, Chelsea's favourite colour. But for all the love, the support and the grieving, one truth remained. Nobody had been arrested. Nobody had been charged. The man that Chelsea was last seen with was walking free, and the wait for justice was only just beginning. Even before Chelsea's body was found in August of 2017, lurking in the shadows of her disappearance was a man who, from the very beginning, drew the attention of investigators. He was much older than Chelsea. In fact, he was more than 60 years old in 2017. He was a man who lived on the outskirts of Abbotsford and Mission. He was not a part of Chelsea's circle, and he was not a family friend. He was someone that she only crossed paths with through an ultimately dangerous arrangement. This man ran an illegal left-handed asparagus grower in the forest. It was hidden between gravel roads and dense trees, an operation that was far from ordinary life in Abbotsford. He offered workers cash or sometimes the green itself in exchange for help clipping his plants. Her father Ray would later stress that she was never employed by him, that she had simply agreed to trim plants in return for her own. It was supposed to be just a brief exchange, one single day of work. But this connection linked Chelsea to a man who was far more secretive and far more dangerous than she ever could have imagined. And as police pieced together her final movements, his presence loomed larger and larger. He had been the last person seen alone with her. He admitted that they went to his crop together in the Mission backwoods. And yet, despite the connection, despite what seemed obvious, no arrest came. In fact, for 5 long years, the case stalled. Police called it an active investigation. But for Chelsea's family, it felt like an endless limbo. They had lost Chelsea, they had buried Chelsea, but they still didn't know why or when or how justice would ever come. During those years, Ray kept his daughter's memory alive online. He became known to many as Trucker Ray. Through his YouTube channel, he shared updates. He shared his grief and also his pleas for help. In one early video, his voice cracked as he said, "Somebody did this to her, and the police are working on it right now." In another, he admitted the guilt that haunted him. "I could have possibly put a stop to what happened to her," he said. Ray urged other parents to learn from this tragedy. Educate yourselves, this could be you tomorrow. Evidence overall was pretty limited. The crime scene had been outdoors. This means it had been exposed to weather, animals, and time. The Crown would need a much stronger case, slowly built up piece by piece. But every year that was passing without an arrest would only deepen the family's frustrations. They knew who she had last been with, they knew where she had gone, and they feared that the system was failing her. Ray later said that he had no idea what had changed between 2017 and 2022, only that the wait had been unbearable. However, he tipped his hat to investigators for never letting this case go cold, although he admits those years were some of the darkest of his life. And by the time 2022 arrived, Chelsea's daughters had now had 5 years growing up without their mother. Father Ray still wears the green ribbon to this day, and the community still wanted answers. It was Saturday, September the 10th, 2022. On that day, the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team finally gave an answer that everyone had been waiting on. At last, they made an arrest. At a press conference outside the Abbotsford Police Department, Sergeant Timothy Perotti spoke to the media. Standing before the cameras, he said the words that Chelsea's family had waited years to hear. Charges have been approved. Gary Loesch has been arrested for second-degree murder and indignity to human remains. The relief was overwhelming, but this case was not over by a long shot. Chelsea's father Ray admitted that when police called him with the news, his emotions were still mixed. "Just a whole ton of emotions hitting me," he told reporters. "But yeah, it was just a nice sense of relief. There is some closure there. But I mean, it's just begun now." The day of the arrest was described by Ray as one that he had dreaded. because now he knew that reliving the details would bring everything back. He also said it was a good day, because at last there was a chance of accountability. Our whole family has been waiting for this for 5 years, he told Global News. And now the fight for justice was moving forwards. But as the years had already shown, nothing about this case would be simple, and this arrest was only just the beginning.
She would say anything to us. We all knew each other's lives, and then all of a sudden, it went dark.
Saturday, Gautier's cousins and best friends came to the Abbotsford Police Department to question an IHIT spokesperson, demanding to know why investigators had not acted sooner.
When everybody is saying, this is who it is, this is what happened, this is the evidence, why, I just don't understand why it would take 5 years.
IHIT not willing to speak on the specifics of the evidence that had led to Loesch. Those close to Chelsea Gautier say at the time she had been looking for a job to support herself.
And she was trying to get in a better spot for her kids.
He goes to prison and pays for what he did because she didn't deserve that.
IHIT now says that Gary Loesch will be held in police custody over the weekend and that he is set to appear in court for his first appearance on Friday. Emaragahi, Global News.
So for the family, this was a bittersweet moment. Closure in one sense, but also the reopening of a deep hurt. Because now, after years of silence, they would have to sit through a trial that would reveal just how dark this case was. And Ray wasn't the only one who had been waiting all of this time. Chelsea's friends gathered at the press conference that day too. Some voiced frustration with how long it had taken. One said, "We all knew his character. He had threatened a friend of ours. It was just a lot of stuff that pointed to him." The sense in the community was clear. Gary Loesch had always been the suspect. It was just a matter of proving it. The trial would reveal evidence that shocked even those who thought they already knew the full story. And when the verdict finally came in 2025, well, brace yourself for that one. Loesch himself was no stranger to the police. As we know, at the time that Chelsea met her end, he was running an illegal grow operation. And that's how the agreement that Chelsea would do some clipping in return for some product, something that seemed to make sense for both of them, but it placed Chelsea in Gary Loesch's orbit, and that was a pull that she would never escape.
And we'll see you next time, hopefully in 2025 with some positive results and information and a positive video that I can tell you that he's now in jail permanently for the rest of his life. God bless you all in the name of Yeshua. Chelsea, I miss you very much. Bye, everyone.
The trial of Gary Loesch began in February of 2025. It had now been more than 7 years since Chelsea's disappearance. The courtroom in Abbotsford was filled almost every single day. Family members, friends and supporters came to bear witness. Many still wore those green ribbons pinned to their clothes, a silent tribute to Chelsea. The Crown presented a case that was largely circumstantial. There were no eyewitnesses to the actual act, and Gary Loesch himself never took the stand, but the evidence painted a picture that was difficult to ignore. First came the phone records. They placed Loesch in the area of Sylvester Road and Dale Road on July 27, 2017, the very day that Chelsea vanished. They also showed him returning there in the days after. Then came photographs found on Loesch's phone, images which showed Chelsea taken at the grow-up, and these images were captured on the last day that Chelsea was seen alive. The most damning piece of physical evidence was the sheet, that same sheet that Chelsea's body had been wrapped in, before then being buried in a shallow grave. Forensic testing revealed a DNA match to Gary Loesch. It wasn't a full profile, just partial, but it was enough to link him to the scene. Loesch's own words also undermined him. When first questioned, he told police that Chelsea had become frightened of bears and hitchhiked home, and as we know, later he changed his story, this time saying she left with a boyfriend and someone else. The judge would later point to these lies as proof that Loesch's accounts could not be trusted. A witness named Bill, a friend of Loesch, testified that he had driven both Loesch and Chelsea up to the grow-up that day, so we can guess that Bill was the driver of the car that picked Chelsea up from the McDonald's parking lot. Bill said that he was supposed to return to the grow and pick them up later, but when he returned, only Gary Loesch was waiting, According to Bill, Loesch claimed that Chelsea had left in the night, that she was gone by the time morning came, but investigators believed otherwise. Justice Dev Delay called the Crown's case circumstantial but compelling. He said the location of Chelsea's body was especially significant. After all, she was buried on the very property that she had gone to with Loesch. Inconceivable, he said, that she could have left alive, been ended somewhere else, and then brought back to the property to be buried there. The judge also dismissed Gary Loesch's suggestion that someone else might have been responsible. He had floated theories about the people that he worked for, that they may have thought that Chelsea was an informant. But the judge was clear, those claims were not believable. The autopsy revealed that Chelsea's time on this earth was ended from one sharp force strike to her back. It was just one blow, but that was enough. The judge noted that there were unanswered questions about motive, and that because she had been found unclothed from the waist down, there may have been a sexual component. But he stressed that there was no way to prove intention beyond a reasonable doubt, and it was for that reason that he ruled out second-degree murder. To convict on that charge, the Crown would need to be able to show intent to kill. Instead, the judge concluded that the case met the standard for manslaughter, and he added a second conviction, indignity to human remains. This is because Chelsea had not only had her time ended, but had also then been hidden in a shallow grave. For Chelsea's family, the mixed verdict was a shock. Yes, Gary Loesch had been found guilty, and yes, the court did agree that he was responsible, but the word murderer would never be attached to his name. And now, perhaps most devastating of all, he was allowed to walk free on bail whilst awaiting sentencing. A bail, by the way, that was only $5,000. Father Ray stood outside the courthouse still wearing that green ribbon. He said, "What we're doing now is hoping and praying that he will get the maximum for manslaughter, whatever they can give him." His son Jeremiah, Chelsea's brother, echoed that frustration. He called his sister his best friend, and he said, "Honestly, I think he's a flight risk and it's very concerning." For the family, the trial had given answers, but it had brought no real peace. They left the courtroom that day with the truth confirmed. Gary Loesch had killed Chelsea. However, the Canadian justice system had not given them the closure that they hoped for. After the verdict in July of 2025, the case moved to sentencing. Manslaughter in Canada carries a maximum penalty of life in prison, but most sentences range between 4 and 15 years. For Chelsea's family, that possibility was difficult to accept, because to them, the loss of Chelsea was permanent, and any sentence given to Loesch would feel far too short.
The man covered up with a mask and hoodie as he enters the courthouse in Abbotsford is Gary Loesch, and following a trial that lasted months, he's about to learn his fate after being charged with the second-degree murder of 22-year-old Chelsea Gauthier.
He was a good person, a good soul, and you know, she was my best friend.
Gauthier, who was Métis, was last seen July 27, 2017, when she helped Loesch tend to his grow operation in a remote mountainous area near Mission. She was and her body was later found by police wrapped in a sheet and buried in a shallow grave on the mountain.
When she died, a part of me died because she had such an incredible sense of humor. She was goofy. She was fun.
The court heard Loesch had provided various versions to explain Gauthier's disappearance, but the judge didn't believe any of them, saying he satisfied Loesch killed the victim and that there were no other plausible theories or other possibilities. In finding the accused guilty of manslaughter rather than second-degree murder, the judge said Crown had failed to prove the element of intent. Mr. Loesch's attempts to conceal Miss Gauthier's body, his denial of being with her, and his lies to police do not necessarily equate to proof of intent.
This is still a victory. It's been established he did it. He's going to get time. We just hope that the system will give him as much time as possible.
Loesch was also found guilty of interfering with a body. Despite the convictions, he remains out on bail.
It boggles my mind. I don't get it. This is something that needs to change in our justice system. It really does.
But honestly, I think he's a flight risk, right? And it's very concerning.
Do you have anything to say to the victim's family? Loesch's sentencing hearing is set for August 18th. Michelle Bernoro, CTV News, Abbotsford.
Father Ray said that it made no sense to him that Loesch could now walk free. It boggles my mind, he said. I don't get it. It's something that needs to change in our justice system. Knowing that I can run into him at the 7-Eleven down the road, it hurts that much. The pain in his voice was unmistakable. For this father, remembering Chelsea meant more than just mourning her. He wanted people to know who she had been. Goofy, fun-loving, a young woman who loved animals and who lit up rooms with her laughter. She was just 22 years old, and she was a mother. Brother Jeremiah said, when she died, a part of me died. His best friend was now gone.
I have concerns about our justice system. The laws that we have in this country which let a man like that walk free. Right out of the courtroom, if I walked outside and slapped someone, I would have been in jail. But he gets to walk free? We can have an amazing police force, which we do. The IHIT team over and the Abbotsford Police Department, credible. I can't say enough about how wonderful they've been, how professional they have been, how kind and loving they've been. And the work that Andrew and his team did, all of that's wonderful. But if we have a justice system that lets a murderer on the street and slaps his wrist while he's laughing to everybody on the way out, that man didn't even flinch when he was told he was accused for manslaughter. He didn't care. No remorse whatsoever. Apparently, he really liked Chelsea. That's a pile of garbage. He would have said something, I'm sorry this happened, and walked away. If he had any courage at all, he would have said at least that. The man is a complete coward. To wear a mask when you're heading into the courtroom? What are you hiding? You're a coward, Gary. You're an absolute coward. You prey on young girls. That was your thing. You'd bring women up to your grow up. You wouldn't let them bring up their boyfriends. You only wanted the women because you wanted to prey upon them. You had condoms in your tent and rope in your tent like a weirdo would have for a reason. You didn't want them to go up in their work. You were wanting to get a good time while you were up there.
Father Ray has vowed to push for awareness, for parents to stay close to their kids, to question their choices, and to speak up before tragedy strikes. Educate yourselves, he told reporters, because this could be you tomorrow. With this upcoming sentencing hearing, there's a petition for the sentence to be as strong as possible. Here is what it says. In 2017, my best friend, Chelsea Lee Gauthier, a 22-year-old Indigenous mother of two, was brutally taken from us. Her loss was not only deeply personal for me, but also a devastating blow to our community. Chelsea was a vibrant young woman, full of life and dreams for a future with her children. The anguish of her absence is compounded by the feeling that justice has not been fully served. Gary Donald Loesch was charged with manslaughter and committing indignities to her body. Even so, with his conviction, there isn't a minimum sentence. He took an innocent life, and I feel a murder charge with life imprisonment is a justice that Chelsea, her friends, her family, and every Indigenous man and woman will feel that he deserves. Yet, despite the severity of his crimes, there is a very real fear that justice may not be met to its fullest extent. The legal system has often inadequately addressed crimes against Indigenous women, and Chelsea deserves more than to be another statistic. Chelsea's children have been left without a mother, her family is without a beloved daughter, and I am without a best friend. The pain of her loss is immeasurable, but what deepens the wound is the failure to see justice serve its rightful course. We call upon the judicial system to serve justice without leniency in this case. We demand that Gary Donald Loesch receives the maximum sentence allowable by law for his horrific actions. It is imperative not only for Chelsea's family, but also as a statement that society will not tolerate such acts of violence and disrespect, particularly against Indigenous women. Please support this call for justice by signing this petition. Let your signature be a beacon of solidarity for Chelsea and her loved ones, and a resounding demand for accountability and justice. Together we can ensure that Chelsea's death does not go unanswered, and her spirit remains a catalyst for change. Sign this petition and help us drive the change needed To ensure justice is not a promise, but a reality in our legal system. And that's written by Cassidy York, Chelsea's best friend. At the time of me writing this script, the petition has 561 signatures. I'll put the link in the description, and please, if you feel it's right, add your name to the petition. I just want to say that across Canada, the tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, known as MMIWG, is becoming painfully familiar. I spend a lot of time on local news resources in Canada, and I honestly cannot believe how common this is. For decades, Indigenous families have sounded the alarm that their daughters, sisters, mothers, all of them face disproportionate levels of violence. And in fact, a national inquiry confirmed what families had said all along. The systemic failures in policing justice and in social support leave Indigenous women more vulnerable, and their cases too often neglected. Chelsea's case cannot be separated from this wider crisis. I really can't help but think where Chelsea came from has something to do with how Gary is getting away with what he did. I'll keep you updated on that sentencing, but it's not looking good.
Devastated by what's happened, by the loss of Don. Don is still in hospital, the loss of Ian and Heather and Gail.
Erin Patterson told staff at Leongatha Hospital that she thought she might have gastro, a bit of nausea and some stomach cramps, but nothing too serious. Dr. Chris Webster had just spent his morning treating two of her relatives, and they were both extremely unwell. So unwell, in fact, that their organ systems were beginning to shut down, and they weren't the only ones. In another hospital, Don and Gail Patterson, Erin's in-laws, were deteriorating fast. All of them had been happy together, sharing a meal at Erin's house just the day before. So if Erin was now falling ill too, then she needed urgent medical care. Now this entire family was all living a shared nightmare. You won't see this one coming. Here we go. In court, Ian Wilkinson remained calm and soft-spoken. He had survived the lunch, but only barely. He spent 7 weeks in hospital. He was in a coma, had a liver transplant. But on the stand, he still managed to keep his composure. He told the jury that he didn't know the perpetrator particularly well. She was just his wife's niece-in-law. He and Heather had seen her at church occasionally. Things were friendly, he said. She just seemed like a normal person. On July the 29th, 2023, Ian and Heather had been invited to a casual Sunday lunch at Erin's house in Leongatha. They weren't the only guests. Don and Gail Patterson, Erin's former in-laws, were there too. That couple had been a part of Erin's life for nearly 2 decades. Erin had reportedly invited the group under the guise of sharing a difficult health update. But more on that later. For the main course, she served up individual beef Wellingtons. Rich, savoury parcels of beef, mushroom paste and pastry. She served this with mashed potatoes, green beans and gravy. 4 servings all went out on grey plates for the guests, and Erin took a serving for herself on an orange plate. It sounds like she was being nice enough to let her guests have matching crockery. Simon Patterson, Erin's estranged husband, had been invited too, but he'd pulled out the day before. So a 6th beef Wellington was left in the fridge, just in case. The group said grace together, they ate, they chatted and they laughed. Heather Wilkinson made a quiet comment as they were finishing their meal. I've puzzled about it since lunch. Is Erin short of crockery? By the very next morning, all 4 of the guests were now violently ill. On August the 4th, 5 days after the lunch, Gail Patterson and Heather Wilkinson sadly passed away within just hours of each other. Both had suffered irreversible liver failure. Both had been told that there was little hope. Sadly, Gail had been too sick to qualify for a transplant. Heather didn't even get a chance. The next day, Don Patterson, Simon's father, also passed. He had received a liver transplant, but his body had rejected it. He didn't make it through the night. At this point, 3 of the 4 guests, all of whom had eaten the home-cooked lunch, were now gone. And the 4th, Heather's husband, Ian, was now in a medically induced coma. Clearly, something had gone terribly wrong with that lunch. Back in Melbourne, Erin, who had hosted the meal, was now sat across from a detective. She was quite unemotional, even flat. She said that she'd accidentally mixed some store-bought mushrooms with some other mushrooms that she'd dehydrated earlier in the year. Where did those mushrooms come from? She said she couldn't remember. Maybe an Asian grocer, or maybe Mount Waverley. She added that she probably paid cash for the mushrooms. There were no receipts, and the mushrooms came in just plain packaging. She also claimed that she had been sick too, that she had vomited, that she'd had diarrhea and even gotten medical assistance. However, her hospital records showed no sign of the same organ failure as everyone else. In fact, they said that there were no toxins in her system whatsoever. And strangely, she discharged herself just 24 hours later, which was against medical advice.
I understand you went down to the hospital and got treatment and that. What kind of treatment did you get?
Oh, they hooked me up to a drip.
A drip?
Yeah. They said that because we're concerned. So Dr. Webster had to leave. I think he was at the end of his shift, and he passed on to another doctor, Dr. Foote. And she said to me, because the concern is that everybody's eaten something that hurts your liver, we need to give you this protective medicine. And so there was saline and acetyl something or other. I don't know what it was. But she said, we need to give you this and then put you in an ambulance up to Melbourne where they can give you more, I don't know what the word is, more, where they can care for you better. Yeah. So I got saline and this other stuff and went in an ambulance up.
Okay.
And when doctors said that they needed to test her children, who she claimed had also eaten the leftovers from that lunch, Erin hesitated for hours. One nurse recalled pleading with her. They can be scared and alive, or dead. Eventually the children were tested, and both of them were fine, with no trace of poison whatsoever in their systems. Thankfully, they also had no symptoms. In fact, it was as if they hadn't eaten the same meal at all, even though it was said that they did. So this raised the question, had the leftovers that the children were said to have eaten ever actually existed?
And you gave them the PIN code for your gate?
Correct.
And directed them to the bin where there were some leftovers?
Correct.
What are those leftovers that you directed them to?
They were the uneaten food from the lunch.
Okay. Right. So you helped them in getting that so it could be sampled?
Because my kids ate the meal too.
Yeah.
But there was stuff that was left over and it went straight in the bin. And so when I went to the hospital and they said they were concerned that everyone ate some contaminated food, I said, well, there's the leftovers in the bin, you can have it. Feel free to look through it.
Yep.
And I said, I'll go and get it if you want. And they said, well, that's fine, you need to go on a drip. We'll call the police. And I said, well, that's fine, just let them know I need to give them a PIN code.
Yep.
So they did that and a bag of food appeared a bit later.
Yep.
Yeah.
So thank you for helping us locate that.
It's fine.
All right.
Long before that fatal lunch, ex-husband Simon Patterson believed someone was trying to end him, specifically his estranged wife, Erin. He hadn't told many people, because he wasn't sure himself at first. But in November of 2021, after eating a container of penne bolognese that Erin had sent home, Simon fell violently ill. So ill in fact that he had to spend the night in hospital. I had the idea I got sick from Erin's food, he told police later. I didn't give it too much thought at the time. But then it happened again. In May of 2022, the couple went camping in the high country. Erin cooked a chicken korma over the fire, a meal that Simon didn't see her prepare. And terrifyingly, just a few days later, he was in a coma. Part of his bowel had to be surgically removed to save his life. He was so bad, in fact, that doctors told his family to say goodbye twice. But thankfully, he survived. By September, though, it happened again. This time after eating a vegetable wrap during a coastal day trip. Simon's symptoms escalated fast. There was nausea, slurred speech, muscle failure, and seizures. By the time he reached the hospital, the only parts of his body that he could still move were his neck and lips. That's when a family friend, Dr. Chris Ford, told him to start keeping a food diary. In early 2023, Simon returned to Dr. Ford with a sad suspicion. He believed that Erin was trying to poison him. He told Dr. Ford about a batch of cookies that Erin had sent over. She said that their daughter had baked them, but Erin kept calling to check if Simon had eaten one yet. He hadn't. In fact, he never did. With all of this going on, Simon quietly changed his medical power of attorney and told only a handful of people about his fears, including his sister, Anna. When Anna learned about the lunch that Erin was planning in July, she called her parents to warn them. Dad said, "No, we'll be okay," she later told the court. 5 days later, she was standing in a hospital chapel beside her brother, and by then their parents, aunt and uncle were all down the hall clinging onto life. That's when Simon told the family what he hadn't told them before. "I didn't think she'd ever hurt anyone else," he said. "I thought it was just me." 3 days after the dreaded lunch, Erin Patterson drove to the Coonawarra tip. She parked beside the green waste bins and got out of her car, in her hands a food dehydrator. CCTV footage later showed her tossing it into the skip. Casual, quick, no hesitation. By the time investigators recovered it, the damage was already done. However, inside, forensic experts could still find what they needed: Erin's fingerprints. There were also traces of Amanita phalloides, aka the death cap mushroom. Back at Erin's house, police found the dehydrator's instruction manual, which was tucked away in a kitchen drawer. Despite what she told police, she had owned the dehydrator. In fact, she'd used it, posted about it on Facebook, saying, "I've been hiding powdered mushrooms in everything." She wrote in one group message, adding, "Mixed it into chocolate brownies yesterday." The kids had no idea. Those posts had been deleted before police arrived, but digital forensics got them back. But if she was innocent, why was she lying? Erin later claimed that she got rid of the dehydrator because people were accusing me of poisoning them. She'd also been using 3 phones at the time of the lunch, 2 of which had gone missing, and the 3rd of which had been factory reset 4 times. In court, a forensic tech described the digital wipes as deliberate and thorough. This wasn't just about erasing recipes. There was evidence there of something far more planned. To the police, it looked like a panicked plan. To the prosecutors, it looked like guilt. But what would it look like to the jury? Back to the table on the day of the lunch. By the time the orange cake came out, everyone was already full. Don had eaten part of Gail's Wellington. He liked steak and she didn't. There was laughter, banter, the usual mid-meal teasing. Things like, make sure the husbands do the dishes. And then came the medical news that Erin said she had to share. She told everyone at the table that she had cancer. The room went quiet. The 2 couples could only offer advice. They could suggest ways to tell her children. They prayed together again, this time for strength and for healing. That detail stuck with Ian Wilkinson. He remembered it vividly during the trial. But Erin later disgustingly admitted the cancer story was just a lie. She said that she'd actually been planning to get weight loss surgery, and she was embarrassed about it, so she made the cancer up as a cover-up. However, there were other lies too. Lies about the mushrooms, lies about being sick, lies about her relationship with her in-laws. To the police, Erin said that Don and Gail were like parents to her, that she loved them. But in a Facebook message sent months earlier, Erin had written, "I'm sick of this poop. I want nothing to do with them." So which Erin was real? The grieving daughter-in-law who had baked a complicated meal to reconnect with her family? Or the woman serving poison on purpose, and then watching everyone eat it while keeping her own plate clean? When detectives questioned why she wasn't as sick as the others, Erin offered an explanation. She said that she'd eaten too much cake and then thrown it up. She now claimed that she was bulimic and she had been since her teens. That's why she didn't get sick. That's why there were no toxins in her system. The police asked, "Why didn't you say any of this sooner?" And Erin's answer was quiet. It was this stupid knee-jerk reaction to dig deeper and keep lying. Coram Borough is the kind of town where everyone knows everyone. The population was just under 5,000. It had tidy streets and rolling hills, a close-knit community built on trust, church and routine. It's also where Erin Patterson's victims had lived for decades. Don and Gail Patterson were deeply embedded in the town. Don was a beloved schoolteacher, and half of the older locals had once been his students. Gail volunteered. She brought meals to neighbours. Heather and Ian Wilkinson were known for their kindness. Ian was the local Baptist pastor, so their sudden passings were a real trauma for the community. And as more details leaked out about the mushrooms, the plate colours, the Facebook lies, the grief turned into a deep disbelief, and then turned into anger. The church posted a notice for the 3 lost lives. They were very special people who loved God and loved to bless others, it read. Simple yet heartbreaking and powerful. But not everyone wanted to talk about it. Some locals shut it down completely, while others whispered in cafes and shops. Had she really done it on purpose? Why had she done it? Meanwhile, outside Erin's deserted home in Leongatha, the grass went wild. Her house sat empty, guarded by a tarped fence and a sign warning off trespassers. Still, people came by to take a look. Locals say that they saw tourists drive by. One even claimed that a tour bus rolled past the gate. In nearby Outram, another small town, residents were horrified to learn that death-cap mushrooms had been spotted growing right along their own fences. But this was useful information. The prosecution could then use cell tower data to suggest that Erin went mushroom foraging in both Outram and Loch. And to back this up further, amateur mushroom spotters have posted photos of the exact locations to a site called iNaturalist. One of those spotters, a local named Funky Tom. This man would later testify at the trial. This part of the world is unusually quiet, the farmer said. Now everyone knows our town for murder. The trial began on April 29th, 2025, in the small, unassuming town of Morwell, 150 kilometres east of Melbourne. From the start, it felt different. 12 jurors, 3 reserves, over 50 witnesses, live media camped outside, and a courtroom that would soon broadcast a sentencing for the first time in Victoria's history. At the centre of it all, Erin Patterson. She remained cool and silent, often completely blank-faced. She sat quietly each day watching her future unravel.
Jen, the Supreme Court has released the vision of Erin Patterson handing over her mobile phone to homicide detectives in August of 2023. This is a month after she poisoned 4 of her relatives with death cap mushrooms baked into a beef Wellington dish. They're sitting at the very table that she served this lunch at. We see her handing over a red mobile phone. This is the phone that the prosecution called her dummy phone, that they said her real phone was never discovered. We hear a bit of exchange between them, and there's some confusion over the pin for this phone. They've also released vision of Erin Patterson at the tip. She's throwing out her food dehydrator that she claimed that she never owned.
The prosecution said that Erin had fed her guests a meal that had been laced with death cap mushrooms, and it was done deliberately. They pointed to the dehydrator, to the digital wipes, to the trip to the dump, and the multiple phones, as well as her lies about her cancer. They also revealed her internet history, visits to foraging websites, posts about mushrooms in Facebook groups, and detailed photos of what looked like death caps that were being weighed on kitchen scales. But in a way perhaps most chilling, they didn't actually present a motive. Only you know why you committed them. Justice Beale would later say, "I will not speculate." However, the defence would lean hard on that same thing. No motive, no murder, they said. They painted Erin as panicked, not predatory. A flawed but loving mother. A woman who made a tragic mistake and then tried to cover it up out of fear. She's not on trial for lying, her barrister told the jury. This is not a court of moral judgment. However, her lying was a problem. She had lied about the mushrooms. She had lied about the dehydrator, about herself being sick. She even lied about having cancer, which for me is just crazy. The jury was asked to consider a haunting question. Had all of this just been an accident? Or had Erin done it on purpose and was now trying to hide it?
Back in the witness box for a second day, Simon Patterson's marriage was under the microscope. The court heard he and Erin Patterson separated amicably in 2015, but in late 2022, their relationship soured. A tense text exchange between the two was shown to the jury in which the pair argued about 70th birthday celebrations for Simon's mother, Gail Patterson. When asked if she would be attending, Erin replied, "I might pass, thanks, as I'd rather not go somewhere I'm not welcome. What I reckon is that everybody forgot to actually invite me to this thing, and I feel very, very hurt about that, and your response is to say I'm being ridiculous." Simon replied, "You're as far off the mark as you possibly could be on this. I know they would love you to be there." The jury heard the following month Ms Patterson requested Simon start paying child support after she discovered he'd listed his marriage status as separated on a tax return. Another text exchange was shown to the jury where Erin requested a meeting with Simon and his parents to discuss expenses for their children. Mr Patterson told the court Erin had become extremely aggressive and he thought the only way to solve their issues was to engage a mediator. He told the court Ms Patterson was on good terms with his parents, but as Don and Gail lay fighting for life in hospital, suffering from death cap mushroom poisoning, she never checked on their condition. It intrigued me that she never actually asked. Ms Patterson has admitted to faking a cancer diagnosis, which the prosecution claims she used to lure them to her Leongatha home for the lethal lunch. But she denies purposely poisoning the beef Wellingtons. Simon Patterson told the court Erin never told him she had ovarian cancer. He also revealed that she hates hospitals. She struggled a lot with mental illness, postnatal depression. She did tell me a few years ago that she had been diagnosed with chronic fatigue or lupus, motor neuron disease, multiple sclerosis. I forget the term that describes them. Simon Patterson's cross-examination will continue when the trial resumes on Monday.
After 9 weeks of testimony and 6 days of deliberations, the jury returned. Erin was guilty on 3 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder. Erin didn't flinch when the verdict was read. There was no real reaction at all, just a long blink. As the court cleared, a few of the victims' family members stayed behind. They just sat in silence. Some of them cried, because on this day, justice had finally arrived. However, that one question still lingered in the air. Why? On September the 8th, 2025, the Supreme Court of Victoria did something that it had never done before. It let the public watch. Inside courtroom 4, a single television camera, broadcasting with a 10-second delay, captured the moment that Erin Patterson was sentenced. She stood in silence as Justice Christopher Beale delivered his words. 3 life sentences for the murders of Don and Gail Patterson, as well as Heather Wilkinson. 25 years for the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson, all to be served concurrently. However, there will be no possibility of parole for 33 years. That means that Erin Patterson will be 82 before she can even ask for release. The judge called her crimes a betrayal of trust on an unfathomable scale. He said that she had shown no remorse, that she had watched her guests eat a meal that she knew was laced with poison, and then she did nothing as they died. He also acknowledged what prison would look like for her. 15 months in near solitary confinement, 22 hours a day in her cell, no contact with other inmates. Her notoriety now meant that she was a high-risk prisoner for others and for herself.
For the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson, I sentence you to 25 years imprisonment. For the murder of Heather Wilkinson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. For the murder of Gail Patterson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. For the murder of Don Patterson, I sentence you to life imprisonment. All sentences are to be served concurrently. The total effective sentence is life imprisonment, and I fix a non-parole period of 33 years. I declare that you have served 676 days by way of pre-sentence detention. Finally, and by consent, I make the disposal order sought by the prosecution. Would you please remove Ms Patterson?
My purpose here today is to give some well-earned thanks. Firstly, to Victoria Police, in particular the Homicide Squad and the team led by Detective Stephen Eppingstall. They made a professional, efficient and effective investigation into what happened at the lunch. They brought to light the truth of what happened with the death of 3 good people. We're grateful for their skills that brought this truth to light. And I'm also very grateful for the kindness and compassion they showed us, me and my family, throughout the long process that has brought us to this day. They've done a wonderful job.
Ian Wilkinson, the lone survivor, had offered Erin forgiveness during a pre-sentence hearing. "I am no longer Erin Patterson's victim," he said. "She has become the victim of my kindness." Simon Patterson, Erin's estranged husband, said the hardest part wasn't just losing his parents, it was watching his children lose their mother. "They've been robbed with the kind of relationship with their mum that every child deserves," he said. Justice Beale gave Erin until October the 6th to appeal, but so far she hasn't. She does, however, maintain her innocence. She still insists that it was all an accident. But the court didn't believe her, the country doesn't believe her, nor do I.
Convicted triple murderer Erin Patterson could be facing even more time behind bars. Crown prosecutors are reviewing her 33-year sentence, concerned it was too lenient.
Jailed for a minimum 33 years, mushroom cook Erin Patterson was spared a life behind bars last week. But her so-called good fortune could be short-lived, with the Director of Public Prosecutions reviewing the case for appeal.
Look, from the outset I thought it was a bit light on, given the gravity of the offence that she was convicted of. I would have expected life with no parole.
So did Crown Prosecutor Jane Warren, but Justice Christopher Beale settled on a lighter punishment, taking into account Erin's harsh prison conditions in solitary confinement. There are now fears it'll set a precedent.
Well, that's the problem with our sentencing system. Precedent plays a major role in it, and in future they'll use this as a precedent case with other defence barristers.
An OPP spokesperson told 7 News the appeals process is stringent and difficult to achieve. The office still deciding what to do.
I think it's definitely a powerful and a clear message from the DPP. We want this closed. If you're even thinking about putting an appeal, we're going to come back and say that the sentence wasn't harsh enough.
Erin Patterson maintains her innocence, but it's unclear whether her team will challenge her convictions. Both sides have just 19 days left to lodge an appeal.
It could go either way. It could be harsher or it could be lower.
The lake keeps secrets. It swallows up sound, and it can say nothing back. A truck crawls along a dirt road. Headlights cut through the trees. The night envelops it all. Somewhere music still plays in town. Laughter spills from doorways. A phone lights up and then goes dark once again. But the new morning will shed light on what midnight left behind. However, this new day just brings more questions. Why here? Why now? Why her? Before the answers would come together, there would be disjointed fragments. A dare in 6 letters stamped in metal. A caption about a baby that wasn't human. A photo with a faint line that might mean everything, or mean nothing at all. A letter addressed to 2 people who loved a son. A sentence that starts, "Dear Mom and Dad," but then opens a door straight to hell. A watch that somehow remembers what a missing phone cannot. Promises that vanish before they're kept. An invite that reads like hope. A long drive that feels like everything is going to be okay. By the time the deputy turns onto the ridge, the story is already written. Only some of the names were missing. Stay with me. This case has some insane twists, and it ultimately reveals something absolutely infuriating. But we'll take it from the start. So here we go. Before Sardis Lake, before the events of this video, there was just Ali. Her full name was Alexandria Costile. But to her friends, she was just Ali. To her family, she was their daughter, the light of their lives. And to anyone who spent 5 minutes around her, she was pretty unforgettable. She grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. She was the kind of child who filled a room with bouncing energy. cheerleading, track, National Honor Society. She was the kind of girl who jumped straight in, and he wanted to try everything. Her high school track coach, Tom Gose, spoke about her years later. She was that kid. The reason that coaches coach, he said. She didn't take the easy way out. She liked challenges. She wasn't afraid of working hard. And it was that drive that followed her to the University of Mississippi. Ali had dreamed of Ole Miss, another name for the university. She loved all the flowers on campus. She even told her mother, Cindy, that they were one of the reasons that she wanted to go there. And when she finally arrived, she threw herself into college life with the same enthusiasm that she carried with her her whole life. She founded the Ole Miss Golf Club. She led the running club. She taught yoga and Pilates. She joined the Alpha Phi sorority. She joined a business fraternity. She wasn't really just a student at all. She was a huge part or the leader or founder of a lot of communities. Her friends remember her constantly rearranging and decorating her apartment. It was always pink. It was always beach themed. She loved turquoise, seashells and palm trees. And Ali really loved sunsets. In fact, she loved them so much that she created a special Instagram account just for them. Every evening sky was a canvas to Ali.
Ali, what are you doing? Taking a picture for sunsets by Ali. Follow it.
Her friends remember her as bubbly, as fun and outgoing, as someone who could strike up a conversation with anyone. Maddie Norris, one of her closest friends from high school, said that Ali was like her sister. If Ali was there, I was there. She was like my other half, she said. When Ali didn't have a prom date, Maddie asked to go with her. They went as best friends, laughing all the way. When she went to Ole Miss, Ali found another sisterhood in Morgan Hull and Elizabeth Brock. The three of them became inseparable. They studied together, partied together, and confided in one another. But even these friends didn't fully know the other side of Ali's life, not the part that revolved around a certain boy. Ali had a vision for her future. Her mom recalls, she wanted to meet a southern boy, marry, have children, and she thought Ole Miss would be the perfect setting. And it was Brandon Thiesfeld that seemed like the answer to that dream. Brandon was from Texas, a state that Ali just adored. He was tall, athletic, and allegedly handsome. To Ali, he was the crush, the boy who might be the one. But to Brandon, she was something else. Her friends say they rarely saw him. Morgan Hull admitted that she'd only ever met him once. Elizabeth Brock said that she'd never met him at all. That's how separate those two worlds were. There was Ali's bright social world that was filled with friends, workouts and sunsets. And then there was her private obsession with Brandon. Her friends didn't understand why she clung on to him. They saw the text messages. They saw the dismissive replies and the cold tone. They heard the way that he spoke to her. It was unkind and often degrading. They told her to just walk away, and they didn't understand why she couldn't. Maybe it was that dream of the southern boy. Maybe it was the idea of a perfect romance. Maybe it was just Ali's big heart, refusing to let go of someone that didn't want to hold on to her. Her parents saw something else again. When they visited Ali that last summer, she seemed happy. She begged them to stay just one extra day. She wanted her mom's cooking. She wanted to shop for new decor. And parents Cindy and Keith left thinking that their daughter was thriving, that she was on the cusp of her senior year, that she was about to step out into everything that she'd been working towards. But just days later, Ali was gone. So Ali was much more than what later happened. She was sunsets. She was pink sorority dresses. She was running tracks and golf swings and yoga mats. She was late night chick flicks and laughing with her best friends. She was the girl who wanted to decorate her room with seashells, not because it was in fashion, but because it just made her feel happy. And she was the girl who should have graduated in 2020, who should have walked across that stage, degree in hand, who should have had a whole life ahead of her. If Ali's life was defined by light, then Brandon's was shaped by shadow. To the outside world, he looked like the classic Southern college kid. He was athletic and outdoorsy. He played soccer, he hunted and he fished. He came from a well-off family in Fort Worth, Texas. His father, Daniel Thiesfeld, was a respected doctor and anesthesiologist, and on paper Brandon had everything: money, comfort, opportunities, and privilege. But beneath that polished surface, people saw something else. One of his dorm neighbours, Rex Ravita, remembered him well, and he didn't mince his words. He was pretty much a daddy's boy type, Ravita said. Constantly had to reference his father's money, how his dad could get him out of anything. Any type of vulgar comment he could say, any type of rude comment to anybody in our dorm, any of the women. He was misogynistic. He was arrogant. So that was Brandon's reputation. The guy who thought he was untouchable. Someone who didn't respect women. The boy who leaned on his father's wealth like a shield. But to Ali though, he was something different, at least in the beginning. When she first met him at a bar during her freshman year, he seemed exciting. Texas-born with flashes of charm, she invited him to a sorority dance, and then the relationship progressed. But it was never balanced. In fact, it wasn't even close. It was on again, off again, and it was reduced to just random hookups. There were text messages that sometimes went unanswered for days. Brandon never truly was Ali's boyfriend. He was never her partner. To him it was casual, but to her it felt like it could be more. Her friends didn't understand what she saw in him, and it seems like they were kept completely separate. And for all of their closeness with Ali, Brandon was a ghost in her social circle, and yet he occupied her thoughts, her text messages, her emotions. Friends said that she often cried over him. She showed them messages where he was cruel, dismissive. She even once described him as crazy aggressive. So the friends told her to just walk away, but she didn't, or maybe she couldn't. Online, the cracks in Brandon's persona were even more visible. He bragged, he posed with firearms, he projected privilege, bravado, and digital data between the two of them showed that Brandon was even emotionally abusive. One of Ali's friends went so far as to say that it was harassment. He harassed her for years, took advantage of her for years. I spent countless nights holding Ali close, drying her tears about this monster, she wrote online. Another friend described him bluntly. He was super misogynistic. He'd have 6 girls around a table, and he'd just sit back and laugh at them like a pig. Those voices, raw and unfiltered, painted a chilling picture of Brandon. But in Ali's private world, Brandon still remained the obsession. Even when he blocked her number, she found ways to reach out. Even when he ignored her, she kept on messaging. Her friends were just baffled. Why him? Why this boy who seemed to treat her with such little care? And the answer may lie in the gap between Ali's dreams and Brandon's reality. Ali wanted that southern boy, the romance, the future, and Brandon wanted casual flings, substance usage, alcohol, and the freedom to just walk away. By their junior year, something had shifted. They were back in touch once again, but nothing had changed. She wanted more, he wanted less. And then came the text messages that would change everything. In April of 2019, tension between them escalated. Any positive elements of the relationship seemed to have evaporated completely. Ali texted Brandon endlessly. Sometimes long emotional messages, sometimes desperate self-destructive ones. She spoke about excessive drinking, maybe to shock him, maybe to get his attention, and maybe to get his help. She begged him to meet up. But Brandon always kept her at arm's length. He continued to ignore her, or sometimes he would agree to meet, but then not show up. The imbalance between them deepened. Her world spun around him, and his world wanted nothing to do with her. But still, he didn't totally let her go. Behind the scenes, Brandon was spiraling too. If Ali was this sunbeam of a person, then Brandon was a storm cloud that slowly crept in. At first, he was just a shadow on the horizon of her life, but then he became a presence that blocked out her light completely, until finally he consumed everything. When police found Ali's body, her phone wasn't there, but her Apple Watch was. And that watch held some secrets. It synced her messages. It preserved conversations that otherwise may have been lost forever. Through that watch, and through phone records pulled later, investigators could now piece together a dark truth. The messages began in April of 2019. Ali was nervous. She'd missed a period, so she bought a home pregnancy test, the result of which seemed inconclusive. There was a faint pale blue line that could have meant nothing. She snapped a picture and sent it to Brandon. Her message read, like it's a very faint blue line, but I don't know, I guess I can wait and see if my period comes. Brandon's reply was swift. Well, all right, we will see, but if it is pregnant, we are not keeping. We can get a pill. He didn't say we'll talk about it or I'm here for you, or don't worry, we'll figure it out together. Instead, it was just a cold calculation. No kid, take a pill. He made his viewpoint very, very clear. He said that this would ruin his life. For Ali, though, it was not so simple. Her responses to Brandon's cold shoulder were long, emotional, and sometimes also defiant. One message said, I'm not saying what I'm going to do because I don't know what's happening. But even if you don't want to be involved, like I'm really pretty and sweet, and I know I will meet a real man one day. But it was like she was bargaining with a brick wall, trying to convince herself of her worth, and also trying to convince Brandon that she deserved more. But Brandon wouldn't move an inch. He continued ignoring her for hours, sometimes days. And when he did respond, it was short and dismissive. Ali begged to meet in person. She said that it would be better than endless text messages. But Brandon either outright refused or just strung her along. I can talk tomorrow, he said once. I'm busy today. I'm still going to have the decision of the pill. So for him, there was no debate. And for her, there was everything to lose. The desperation in Ali's text messages only grew. She confessed to drinking heavily. In the past 48 hours, I've literally drank a full bottle of tequila, 2 bottles of champagne, 7 beers, a glass of wine. A forensic psychologist later wondered if she'd exaggerated this, if she was just trying to shock Brandon, trying to get him to respond. They likened it to saying, hey, look at me, I'm in trouble, please come save me. But even if those numbers were inflated, the message was still real. Ali was spiraling. Well, they both were. And it didn't seem like they had any middle ground any longer. By July, things had escalated once again. On July the 12th, she sent him another picture of 2 pregnancy tests. It was still kind of ambiguous. That same day, Brandon drove to Texas. He came back with his father's .40 caliber Glock. He posted a picture of it on Snapchat. It was a photo of the weapon in his truck, and the caption read, finally taking my baby back to Oxford. What I found strange about this is that he spoke more fondly of this hunk of metal than he did Ali. It was during this time that his search history darkened too. How to get away with crimes, how to conceal crimes, Ted Bundy, how to tie people up, how to lure people. He also searched queries about ammunition, hollow point ammo, what button does what on a Glock pistol.
He posted a picture on Facebook of his son in 2013. It says, target practice. My son Brandon Thiesfield, gun tactical expert.
I mean, I know nothing about guns, but that one made me laugh. So we can see that Brandon was descending down a rabbit hole. He was now almost entirely enveloped by darkness. Meanwhile, Ali's text messages painted a different picture. She still just wanted to meet. She started sending him photos of herself. She hinted that her body was changing. One message read, like it isn't like I'm not that small anymore, and I can pretend I'm fat right now, but I don't know, it's getting hard. Brandon's replies were practical, almost predatory. Just let me know when you're back from going out. Is your house private right now? So for Ali, after all of the rejection, maybe this sounded like some progress. Maybe she thought that he finally wanted to talk about the future, about the baby, about them. However, prosecutors later said that these messages actually revealed something else. He wanted to know if anyone would be around to see or hear anything he might want to do. This digital trail preserved almost everything. Every plea, every dismissal, every promise to meet that he didn't keep. It became the diary of a toxic relationship, one-sided, unequal, and dangerous. When investigators read through it, they saw everything coming into focus. Friday, July the 19th, 2019, Oxford, Mississippi. It was the middle of summer, and the square was alive. Bars lit up in the night, students moved between neon signs, and laughter and music was spilling out into the streets. For Ali, it was just another night out, hoping that this was the night that Brandon would finally come through. She'd been waiting, texting, asking to meet, and earlier that day he'd sent her a message. At 3:50 p.m, Brandon said, "Are you going to be home today? 'Cause I could visit." That small promise might have been enough to just make her believe. At 11:52 p.m, security cameras caught Ali leaving Funky's, a popular Oxford bar. She walked out past the doorway, briefly greeting a friend on the sidewalk, before heading down the street. She wore a light-coloured shirt and shorts, her blonde hair standing out under the streetlights. To anyone watching, she looked like just another college student heading home after a night out. But this was the last time she was ever seen alive in Oxford. Minutes later, she got into a silver minivan, an Uber. It took her back to her apartment at The Retreat, a student housing complex just outside of town. Her roommates later said that she came home at around midnight, and that nothing seemed unusual. But then, sometime after that, Ali left again. No one heard her, no one saw her. At around 1:28 a.m, a pickup truck pulled up outside her house. Ali got in. Judging by the messages leading up to this, we can imagine she was grateful to finally see him. Maybe to talk, maybe to reconcile, maybe to finally plan for the future. And so Brandon drove her away from the city lights, away from the people, and out towards Sardis Lake. The drive took 40 minutes. Ali trusted, Ali hoped. The road narrowed down, it turned to gravel and then to dirt. They pulled into Buford's Ridge, an old fishing camp. It was pretty desolate. Just trees, the lake, and the sound of crickets. They sat down at a picnic table.
Alexandria Castile's body was found near a lake about 30 miles from campus, and investigators suspect foul play.
Here at home, family and friends, of course, they are grieving. Our Morgan Young spoke with some of her friends today.
When I found out, I just could not stop crying.
A lot of times, friendships come, go, and fade with time. Not for Ali Castile.
I knew her really well.
Lexi Natsis says she met her in 2nd grade. They were in the same Girl Scout troop.
Me and my mom both started bawling our eyes out because my mom knew her very well. She was one of our Girl Scout moms.
A childhood friend who says what stuck with her was the way Castile made people feel.
She would make you feel better about who you were.
Margaret Illig and Sammy Martin say they were best friends in high school. Sammy told me she was an amazing friend and had the kindest heart. Margaret describes her as a ray of sunshine, saying she was always positive and uplifting. Then there's Anna Pasco, who says she and Ali became good friends after meeting their freshman year at Ole Miss.
She always had a smile on her face, even through darkest times.
A legacy of kindness, selflessness, and joy, sprinkled through her 21 years of life, nestled in the memories of friends she made along the way.
I know she could have bettered this world. She had a little bit more time.
Saying the time she had was spent loving others. Morgan Young, 5 on your side.
By Saturday afternoon, July the 20th, 2019, Ali's demise was headline news in Oxford, a bright blonde student with everything ahead of her. It was revealed that somebody took aim, and then 8 blasts rang out, something that Ali would not survive. For investigators, the focus narrowed quickly. Her synced messages revealed what her missing phone could not. Detectives started making calls and a picture began to emerge. Friends confirmed what the messages suggested. Ali had been desperate to meet with Brandon. She thought she might be pregnant. He had been avoiding her for months, and even her closest friends barely knew him. He was not part of their circle, but he was the center of Ali's. Her message history full of longing, rejection, and tension. On Sunday, July the 21st, investigators reached out to Brandon. They asked him to come in for questioning. He stalled, he made excuses, and he finally agreed to appear on Monday morning. But Monday came and went, and there was no Brandon. I think it's pretty crazy that he treated the police the exact same way that he treated Ali. Detectives moved in with an arrest affidavit. There was court approval to track his phone, and the signal pinged north. He was no longer in Oxford. He was not even in Lafayette County. He was on Interstate 55, headed out towards Memphis, Tennessee. A BOLO or be on the lookout call went out for his truck. It was pretty hard to miss. His license plate read, "Take it." By late morning, the US Marshals finally had him. A gas station in South Memphis, the truck was seen at the pumps. Officers moved in. Brandon was calm when they cuffed him, composed and somewhat detached. However, he could not remove himself from what investigators found in the truck. They found the Glock, believed to be the same one used on Ali. There was clothing stained with red. And so in just 3 days, Brandon Thiesfeld had gone from a Bolshoi College senior to being a murder suspect now in custody. I just want to talk about that license plate quickly, the vanity plate. It reads like, "Take it." It's like a dare or a flex. I feel like you could maybe see an echo of another phrase. The phrase, "Come and take it." There's no real proof that he meant it that way, but I feel like it kind of tracks with what we know about Brandon. He did call his father's firearm his baby, so it kind of makes sense. So maybe if you're watching from America, there might be some more cultural points that I've missed that might make this make sense. Or you may be able to tell me that I'm just completely wrong and I've missed the point. But I don't know, I feel like it just really says a lot about the boy. Back in Oxford, police searched his apartment. They found a handwritten 2-page letter addressed to his parents. Here is an excerpt that I have tried to decipher. It's written pretty badly and I suck at reading, so wish me luck. If you see something different to what I believe the words say, then please do correct me down in the comments, but here we go. Dear Mom and Dad, I am not a good person. It is not your fault. Something in me just doesn't work. I've always had terrible thoughts. Those thoughts have been fueled by white powder and alcohol. I love you all lots. This isn't your fault. It is very hard to put into words how much I love you all. I don't deserve either of you. I just kind of feel off. I've never been good at school, and I think this is the end for me. I'm either going to prison or going to die. I don't something that in a bad way, but I know I'm going to get caught. I'm sorry I'm a poopy son. I also know you'll love me no matter what. And then he makes a list of bullet points. Sorry for the awful handwriting. I accept your apology. Brooklyn, I love you. And then another name, you are the smartest person I know, I love you. And then another name, thank you for putting up with everything I do. Another name, I'm sorry, just do good for me, I love you. Then yet another name, please keep on a good path, I love you. Then I think it says, Frank, thank you for always being in my life. Eddie, you've provided me with more guidance than you could know. Then he says, I've always had these demons. Please, this is all on me. And there is another page after this, but I can't find it anywhere. To prosecutors, this letter was a confession, but to the defense, it was just a simple cry for help. Either way, it can be seen as pretty devastating. Witnesses began to remember the events of the weekend. A friend said that Brandon arrived at his house carrying his father's weapon. He then unloaded it inside, brought a six-pack. He sat up drinking, and then by morning he was gone. It was just days earlier that he posted that weapon on social media, and in hindsight he probably realised just how dumb this was. The news of Ali was a devastating blow to Oxford, an Ole Miss student, the son of a Texas doctor, a shocking arrest. Old photos now surfaced, Ali and Brandon smiling, arms around each other. Brandon's father, Daniel Thiesfeld, urged presumption of innocence. But as the evidence mounted, the messages, the weapon, the letter, any reasonable presumption of innocence collapsed. From Memphis, Brandon was extradited to Mississippi. Reporters filmed the perp walk. I've got to say, it's pretty satisfying. Shackles, a blank face, and carrying the charge, capital murder. The charge was not only for doing this to Ali, prosecutors said, but also because he lured her under false pretenses, and he took her to a remote place to carry out the plan. For Ali's friends and family, the arrest was no relief. It just brought forward yet another wave of grief. In St. Louis, they wore pink at the funeral. They spoke of kindness and sunsets. They propped each other up. At Sardis Lake, a makeshift memorial appeared. Flowers, candles, photos. A quiet place where people could remember her.
There must have been more than 100 people at the vigil. Ali's friends say they appreciate that turnout because there was nothing she loved more than having her friends together. It was emotional. There were lots of hugs and lots of tears.
I may have been Allie's teacher, but clearly listening to everybody's thoughts tonight, she taught a lot of us as well. And I know our candles are burning, but Allie clearly is a light that's going to shine on in each and every one of you.
She didn't deserve what happened to her. Nobody does, but she didn't especially. And I just want everyone to remember that. I want everyone to focus on how good of a person she was and how much joy she brought into the world and how positive she was, not the situation.
In 3 days, Brandon's double life was exposed. To some, he had been that charming Southern boy. To others, he was known to be manipulative, to be dismissive, cruel and misogynistic. A boy who bragged about his father's money. But everyone now seemed to agree on one thing. Brandon was the one responsible for all of this. The case gained yet another new layer when the autopsy was carried out. Allie was not pregnant, not at the time of passing, not even recently. So why does she believe that she might be? Some friends wondered if she'd unsuccessfully carried earlier in the summer. Messages made references that seemed to support this. Her mother said that she believed Allie had been pregnant at some point. Others think that it was never real, and that inconclusive tests and a description of symptoms just became a way to hold on to a failing relationship. Either way, the medical conclusions seemed pretty clear. Online, the debate exploded. And I just want to say that this really is not victim blaming, I'm just sharing discourse. On Reddit, some argued that pretending to be pregnant would be manipulative, but still nowhere near a justification for what Brandon did. Others felt that she legitimately convinced herself that the line on a stick was faint, and that the hope for a future was strong, verging on desperate. Many saw a toxic loop, her desperation, his contempt, and a spiral towards the worst outcome. Twitter filled with anger. Friends accused Brandon of years of emotional cruelty. They painted him not as panicked, but as a master manipulator who enjoyed control. A forensic psychologist who reviewed the text messages saw a pattern. Her long, vulnerable messages, his cold, transactional replies. The communication was just sufficient to keep her strung along, but not to show her any care. Prosecutors later framed all this as a case of not simply wanting the relationship to end, but taking it further and wanting the problem gone. In your mind, the motive for murder was to get rid of a problem, the district attorney said. Part of the tragedy of this case is that neither of them seemed to be thinking clearly. Allie clung to a future with Brandon, even though everyone else seemed to know that this wasn't a real possibility. Brandon insisted that fatherhood would ruin his life, despite having a family that could have supported him, and then doing something that did completely ruin his life. Honesty in the relationship was replaced with paranoia, manipulation, and silent treatments. And looking back, the red flags were visible. But still, nobody could have imagined the horrifying results of all of these things combined. For 2 years, the case of Allie Costeel's murder wound its way through Mississippi's legal system. The headlines never stopped. Ole Miss student charged with murder, pregnancy rumors at centers of killing. Thiesfeld faces death penalty. The courthouse in Oxford became a stage for the drama. On one side, the Costeels grieving, still in disbelief. On the other side, the Thiesfelds, wealthy, protective, and still insisting on Brandon's innocence.
Our hearts go out to all of those touched by Allie's positive spirit and passion for life, who are now feeling sorrow.
The family of Allie Costeel spoke for the first time, her cousin reading a short statement in court.
We pray for strength in the coming days and are thankful for the friends, neighbors, co-workers, and many others who have supported us.
Costeel's family traveled from St. Louis to Mississippi for the hearing. Brandon Thiesfeld is charged with murder. His attorney says he was going to request bond, but after he discovered new information, he decided to ask for a mental health evaluation.
At first, Brandon entered a plea of not guilty. He was indicted on capital murder charges. In Mississippi, that meant that prosecutors believed another felony crime had occurred alongside the murder, that crime being kidnapping. Prosecutors argued that Allie had only gotten into Brandon's truck under false pretenses, that he lured her there with the promises of talking about the pregnancy, and that deception, they said, amounted to abduction. If the jury agreed, Brandon could face the death penalty. However, the defense was ready to fight. His attorney, Tony Faries, told the press, "They were going to have to show that we kidnapped Ali. She voluntarily got into the truck. They're going to try and say that we tricked her. That's a very big stretch." The defense wanted to frame Brandon not as a predator, but as a flawed young man overwhelmed by alcohol, substances, and panic. They also leaned on his background. He was the son of a respected Texas doctor. He was raised in a Christian home. He had no records of violence. And a life full of promise, as Faries put it. But the text messages, the Google searches, the Snapchats, all of these suggested otherwise. By the summer of 2021, negotiations began. Prosecutors had leverage. Ballistics tied his Glock to the scene. Surveillance showed his truck near her apartment. Phone records placed him with Ali at the time of her demise. His own letter confessed to terrible thoughts and predicted his own prison time or end. The defense had one bargaining chip, the uncertainty of a jury trial. A capital murder trial would be lengthy, emotional, and public. It could re-traumatize Ali's family. And if a single juror hesitated, then the death penalty might slip away anyway. So, a deal emerged. On August 27, 2021, Brandon Thiesfeld walked into court wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked smaller than the swaggering frat boy that people remembered. His parents sat behind him. Ali's family sat across the aisle, dressed in her favourite colour, pink. The charge was now reduced to first-degree murder. In exchange, Brandon pleaded guilty. For the first time, he showed emotion. He read from a prepared statement, his voice slightly cracking. "There is no excuse for my actions. I have asked God for forgiveness, and I hope that one day that you will find it in your hearts to forgive me." He now admitted to killing Ali. He admitted that he changed her family's life forever, but he did not admit why. The courtroom then turned to the victims' voices. Ali's father Keith wrote, "He shot her several times. He hurt her and she bled and he left her. Few people in life will ever feel the pain that we have experienced, and it will never go away." Her mother Cindy did not hold back. In a statement read aloud, she called Brandon evil, callous, scheming, ungrateful, sinister, violent, and corrupt. She ended with a chilling curse. "Brandon, you belong in jail each day for the rest of your life for the heinous act you committed to such a sweet soul in Ali. Every time your cell door slams shut, may it be a reminder for what you did and the life you took from us." The words hung in the courtroom like a sentence before the sentence. This case did not just end with that guilty plea. It travelled out of the courtroom beyond Oxford. It became a mirror to societal issues, gender, power, pregnancy, violence, of mistreating people within a relationship. It revealed the complexity of life and love, and just how wrong things can somehow go. First, there's the personal aftermath. Ali's friends tried to make sense of what had happened. The laughter, the warmth, and also the darkness that she hid. One friend wrote publicly, "He harassed her for years, took advantage of her for years. You will never diminish her sunshine. #Justice for Ali." And Ali's cousin, left devastated, posted, "If you ever wonder why women avoid rejecting you, this is why. We don't know if you're going to be cool about it, or shoot us 8 times and throw our body in a lake." There was also the question of the pregnancy. Ali sent the faint line photos. He pushed that he wanted no kid. She kept on asking to meet, but later, after the autopsy, the internet was split. Some argued that she believed it, some argued that she didn't. However, none of this would change the core of the wrong that Brandon did. Sociologists point to a pattern, in that moments of transition are dangerous, leaving, setting boundaries, or introducing a life-altering variable. In an relationship, any of these things can be devastating. For Ali, the possibility of pregnancy was that variable, and for Brandon, this became a problem for him to erase. There was 2 private storms, both building internally. Some corners of the internet have tried to rewrite Ali as obsessive and clingy, using words that flatten people into objects of debate, attempting to pass the blame. But Ali was 21, she was scared, but she was still hopeful. She was unprepared for the level of cruelty that Brandon was capable of. Even though he was 22, that age is still incredibly immature, especially when you add it to the fact that he was brash, spoiled and violent. All of this combined seemed destined to end badly, but just not this badly. And now there wasn't much that Ali's loved ones could really do. They could wear pink, they could hold vigils, they could post sunsets and set up a memorial in her name. In St. Louis, her coach drove 14 hours to speak at her funeral. He remembered her grit and kindness. He remembered a smile that wouldn't quit. Conversely, Brandon entered a system that is narrow and grey. He's a number instead of a name. And now, rather than trying to hold control over others, he is controlled by locked doors, shackles, and the strict rules of prison life. Investigators would later reconstruct exactly what they believed happened. On the picnic table at the scene, they found empty cans of White Claw. Shell casings were scattered across the dirt. At some point, Brandon had pulled out the Glock, the weapon he'd shared on Snapchat, that he'd brought all the way from Texas. He fired once across the water, maybe to scare her, maybe just to test the weapon. Remember, after all, he was Googling how to actually use it.
My son Brandon Thiesfield, gun tactical expert.
Ali laughed nervously. "You're crazy," she said, according to his later account. He then turned it on her. The first blast came from across the table. She was sitting down. He aimed and then the blast rang out. A shell casing clinked to the dirt. She screamed and tried to move, tried to run, but Brandon followed. He circled the table. With each step came another shot. Pop, pop, pop. 9 in total hitting their target. 11 casings were found on the ground. One was lodged in the picnic table itself. This was rage. It was overkill. It was really an execution. And then Brandon just left her there. Her body crumpled beside the table, her purse laying nearby. The lake was silent once again. Brandon then just got back in his truck and drove away, leaving Ali alone, cold, in the dirt. At 2:15 a.m., a nearby resident walking their dog reported hearing gunshots, but at the time they didn't know what it meant. By 10:23 a.m., a Lafayette County deputy who was on a routine patrol spotted something unusual, a white female lying on the ground. It was Ali. She was already gone. Back in Oxford, her friends were just waking up. Some were hungover from the night before. Some were making breakfast. Her roommates realised that she was no longer home, even though she had come home previously. But some nights do just get messy. Calls went unanswered. Text messages never delivered, and then the news spread. They found a body near the lake, and by that afternoon, her identity was confirmed. The search began immediately. Police called her friends, asked about her life, who she knew. They wanted to know everything about her, and that one name kept on coming up. Brandon Thiesfeld, the freshman year crush, the on-again, off-again boyfriend, the one that she couldn't let go of, the last person she had been texting. Judge Kelly Luther delivered the official punishment on Brandon. He received life in prison. In Mississippi, there is no parole for murder, but because Brandon pleaded guilty to first degree rather than capital, he will be eligible for conditional release at age 65, a lifetime behind bars, but with the faintest chance of freedom in his older years. Reactions were somewhat split. For the Costiles, it was justice, though incomplete. Cindy later said, "Our lives have been forever altered and shattered. Her absence haunts us every day." For Brandon's family, it was devastation mixed with relief. His mother sent a message through his attorney. "Now, after 2 years, and knowing more of the details of their relationship, I am heartbroken for every person this impacts, and crushed that our son did not share with us any of the turmoil he was trying to manage." She urged other parents to talk to their children openly, to make sure nothing was ever too big, too complicated, too out of control to bring it to them. It was a plea for understanding, not just for Brandon, but of how being too judgmental and too unapproachable can actually destroy lives. Outside the courtroom, reporters pressed Faris about motive. Why did Brandon actually do this? The lawyer could only shrug. There's no justification for his conduct, and I believe no good explanation for what he did. He suggested that alcohol and substances played a role, and that Brandon just snapped. But prosecutors rejected that narrative. Assistant DA Mickey Mallette said bluntly, "This was cold and calculated over a very extended period of time. To them, this wasn't a heat of passion killing. It was an execution planned weeks in advance." And in Oxford, this case left scars. Journalist Jake Thompson recalled, "It rocked Oxford to its core. It was tough for both the academic community and the citizens. Ali was one of their own for 4 years. To have it end like this was devastating." Ali's Instagram page for sunset photography became a digital memorial. Every orange and pink horizon reminded them of her. For Brandon, prison life began. His father's money now meant pretty much nothing. Now he had concrete walls, a narrow bed, and decades to think about what he did. As Mother Cindy said, "It's the quietest moments that are the most haunting." On the morning of August the 18th, 2021, a woman named Cindy Sue Hunter sat behind the wheel of her car. She was winding up a narrow mountain road in eastern Utah. Her phone was pressed to her ear. On the other end was a worried father, Sean Paul Schulte. He was desperate for news. By this time, he hadn't heard from his daughter in days. The father told Cindy Sue something strange. His daughter and her wife had mentioned a creepy guy that was hanging around their campsite in the La Salle Mountains. In fact, they'd even moved camp to get away from him. But now, the couple had fallen silent. Cindy Sue felt a growing sense of urgency. The land surrounding her was quiet, but almost too quiet. She drove deeper into the mountains. She kept Sean Paul on the line the entire time, updating him on every bend in the road, every clearing that she checked. And then something caught her eye, a flash of silver in the trees. She slowed down, reversed, and there it was, a blue Kia Sorento. It was parked off a dirt road, partially hidden. It was then that her heart sank. She knew that it was their car. She parked, got out, and walked towards the campsite. The air was heavy, the sound of water trickling from a nearby creek. Around her, camping gear was scattered. A tent sat uneven, its flap open as if left in a hurry. Nearby was a small makeshift pen, holding the couple's pet rabbit, Ruth. Thankfully, the animal was still alive, but thirsty and neglected. This meant that something was very wrong. She told Sean Paul what she was seeing. His voice on the other end was now trembling, urging her to keep on looking. So, she did. Cindy Sue moved onwards through the camp. She saw clothing under a tree, water bottles strewn on the ground, a cell phone propped up inside the tent, and then, near the creek, she saw something that made her stop cold. At first, her mind refused to register it. She turned away, staring at the water, the trees, the sunlight breaking through the branches. But she forced herself to look once again. There, partially submerged, was a body. It was Kylan Schulte. Cindy Sue's voice broke as she tried to explain exactly what she was seeing to Sean Paul. On the phone, hundreds of miles away in Montana, the father cried out, begging her to get back in her car, to lock the doors and to get to safety. Cindy Sue stumbled back, shaking, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had just uncovered the unthinkable. But what she didn't yet realize was that Kylan's wife, Crystal Turner, was also nearby. Both women, just recently married, had fallen victim to evil. Both were gone. The idyllic campsite, the love that they shared, the rabbit that they brought along, all of it combined was now the scene of a double homicide. But how did they end up here? Who was the unnamed creeper dude that had made them feel so uneasy? And why, in this quiet mountain town of Moab, a place famous for national parks and red rock canyons, had these two newlyweds met their fate on a campsite? Nobody had any answers, but as investigators would soon discover, the key to solving this crime had been right in front of everyone all along. And the truth was far darker than anyone imagined. To understand how devastating this crime actually was, you need to know who Kylan and Crystal were. Because before they became victims in one of Utah's most haunting murder cases, they were simply two people in love. Kylan Carol Schulte was 24 years old. She was born in Billings, Montana, so she grew up surrounded by mountains, music, and freedom. Her father, Sean Paul, was a wandering soul, a musician and a storyteller. Her mother, Valerie Carr Treholt, raised her with warmth and stability. Friends said that Kylan carried both, her dad's adventurous streak and her mom's open-hearted tenderness. She was artistic and whimsical, the kind of person who collected crystals, who loved butterflies, and who brought a little magic wherever she went. Her smile was constant and her laugh was contagious. She was the type of person who made strangers feel like family. Neighbours like Melanie Dennis remember Kylan's joy as unshakable. She was adventurous, Melanie wrote, and she never failed to make people smile. Crystal Michelle Turner was different. She was older, tougher, and shaped by hardship. Born on December 30th, 1982, she had walked a longer, harder road before even meeting Kylan. Crystal had been married before. She had children, including a son named Isaac, who really adored her. She knew how it felt to struggle for stability, to carry grief quietly, and to keep moving forward no matter how heavy the burden. On the surface, she was practical and strong. She loved motorcycles, she loved a good steak, and she prided herself on working hard. But behind that exterior was a fiercely loyal heart. Her friends described her as protective, as deeply kind, and as endlessly supportive of those that she loved. So on paper, the two of them seemed like opposites. Kylan, the bohemian dreamer, and Crystal, the grounded survivor. But for whatever reason, when their paths crossed in Moab around 2016, the bond was instant. Their friendship turned to love, and by 2019 they were inseparable. On April 20th, 2021, they made it official. In an intimate ceremony in Arkansas, they were married. Friends said that it was pure joy, just for them. Together, they lived what locals called the van life, not tied down to a mortgage or lease. They just embraced freedom on the road. Often, they camped in the nearby LaSalle Mountains, a high-altitude escape from Moab's desert heat. And always with them was their third companion, Ruth, the rabbit. Ruth had her own makeshift pen at the campsites. Sometimes she even had a stroller to go for walks around town. It was quirky and unusual, but it perfectly captured who Kylan and Crystal were. Protective of those that they loved, finding joy in the small things, and always a little different, but in the best way. Moab itself is a place of contrasts. By day, a booming tourist hub, gateway to arches and canyonlands, flooded with jeeps, hikers, and rental cars. But beneath the glossy travel brochures, locals would whisper about something else, about sky-high rents, about transient workers who drifted in and out, and about tensions between lifelong residents and the newcomers. For Kylan and Crystal, Moab was both home and also a challenge. They worked there, Kylan at the Moonflower Community Co-op, which is a natural health food store, and Crystal at the local McDonald's. Their co-workers described them as inseparable, as always laughing together, as always holding hands. But they also described something else, and that was their vulnerability. Living in their van wasn't just freedom, it was partly necessity. And as two openly queer women in a conservative corner of Utah, they did stand out, and not always in a safe way. Still though, they embraced the LaSalles. The mountains were their sanctuary. A place to string up a hammock, to watch the stars, and to laugh about their days at work. So in some ways their life wasn't easy, but it was theirs. It was a patchwork of love, resilience, and small, stubborn joys. By the summer of 2021, their future felt wide open. They had weathered the storms of past relationships, loss, and even miscarriage. Together they had built something stable, something hopeful. Crystal was working steadily, Kylan was thriving in her community, and together they could now dream of what would come next. But in Moab, shadows were already gathering, because while Kylan and Crystal were building a life filled with love, someone else was watching. And just before they vanished, their conversations would take a darker turn. During a night out at Woody's Tavern, friends remembered them happy, inseparable, but also kind of uneasy. They mentioned a creepy guy near their campsite, someone who just felt wrong. If we don't show up for work, come look for us. At the time, their friends laughed it off, but within days, that joke would feel prophetic. Kylan and Crystal's story should have been one of love, adventure, and a simple life under the stars. But instead, it became a story of fear, violence, and so many unanswered questions. That creeper dude they warned about, he wasn't just an annoyance, he was very real. And he was watching them, and in hindsight, every warning sign had been there. The newlyweds loved camping in the mountains, but in the days leading up to their disappearance, something about their campsite felt different. They told friends and family that a strange man had set up uncomfortably close to them. This is the guy that they called a creeper dude. Crystal, in her blunt way, called him a weirdo. But whatever name they used, it was clear that this man made them feel uneasy. The first encounter happened while the couple were lounging in their hammock. The man pulled up nearby. He got out of his car, and then he howled like a wolf. Crystal laughed it off in a moment, even howling back. That was her way, playful, eccentric, and never one to show fear. But later, when the man returned with bags of groceries, and then began setting up camp just feet away from theirs, the mood really shifted. This didn't feel funny anymore. And when they told their friends about him the next night at Woody's, they said he had set his things down way too close to their spot. In fact, almost inside of their campsite. They joked about keeping their eagle eye on him, but behind the jokes were real concern. In fact, that night, Kylan phoned her father. She told him about the man, about how he was creeping them out, and how they were planning to move their camp. Then she added a line so chilling it would echo in his memory forever. If something happens to us, we were murdered. Their friends, not wanting to ruin a birthday celebration, just laughed it off. Nobody pressed the issue. No one followed the couple out to the bar that night. Nobody could know that danger was now just hours away. But over the next few days, Kylan and Crystal fell silent. They didn't show up for their shifts at work, and they no longer answered calls. By August the 16th, co-workers reported them both missing. And by August the 17th, Kylan's father, Sean Paul, was now frantic. He told his friend Cindy Sue Hunter about the creeper dude and begged her to drive into the mountains to search. The very next morning, Cindy Sue would end up on the phone with Sean Paul and face to face with the horrifying discovery at the creek. When police arrived, the campsite told its own story. The couple's blue Kia Sorento was parked nearby. Their tent flap hung open as if left in a hurry. Their supplies were scattered around. Ruth the rabbit was still alive in her makeshift shelter, but she was in a pretty bad way. And then, not far away, Kylan and Crystal were both found. They were both undressed from the waist down. Someone had pulled the trigger on both of them multiple times, in the back, the sides, and the chest. This was deliberate, targeted, almost an execution, and it lined up with the warning that the women had left behind. They had been afraid of a man camping near them, a man who didn't feel right.
Brian and Amy, just such a sad night here. Crystal and Kai, as everyone knew her, were so loved by the Moab community. You can see just how many people showed up here tonight to pay their respects. You know, people shared stories of the couple and talked about how Kai's smile brightened everyone's day. They talked about the women's love of adventure and how much they're really going to be missed. And then they talked about the heartache and the desperate desire to find the killer or killers.
You sit here and think, what happened? Why won't they tell us anything? Why was this happen to these girls? They were the life of the party, and you sit here and think, why them?
People say it's scary to think this happened, that they hope the Grand County Sheriff's Office figures out what happened very soon. Of course, if you have any information, you are asked to call them. They're hoping that tonight, by again grieving together, remembering these women, that someone out there who knows something will reach out to the Sheriff's Office and hopefully a little piece of justice will be served. Live in Moab.
Investigators had no immediate suspect, but the town, reeling from the shock, was buzzing with speculation. And then, a strange twist added fuel to the fire. because just 2 days before Kylan and Crystal vanished, another couple had been stopped by Moab police. That couple was Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito. Gabby, the 22-year-old whose disappearance and demise would soon dominate national headlines, had been in Moab on August the 12th. And that famous traffic stop, the one with the body cam, that happened outside the Moonflower Co-op, the very store where Kylan worked. Suddenly, the community began asking the unthinkable. Was there a connection? Had the same darkness that had surrounded Gabby and Brian somehow also touched Kylan and Crystal too? At this stage, the answers weren't clear. But one thing was undeniable. Their feelings about the creeper dude weren't just paranoia. He was real, and finding him would be the only way to solve this mystery. But in the days that followed, as investigators pulled cell tower data, as they reviewed surveillance and sifted through tips, the case would only grow more complicated, and soon an audio recording would surface. Some claim that you can hear the screams. Nothing about the crime scene suggested robbery. Money, belongings, and the car were all untouched. This crime wasn't about theft. It was about something or someone else. Autopsies would later reveal more. Both victims had been shot with unusual ammunition, Hornady critical defense rounds, hollow-tipped bullets with a distinctive red plastic insert. Detectives noted how rare this ammunition was. It wasn't commonly seen in homicide cases. This detail would matter later. In the early days of the investigation, police had little to go on. They canvassed nearby campsites, looking for any possible witnesses. They seized both vehicles linked to the couple, those being the Kia Sorento and their broken-down Ford Econoline van. Meanwhile, the community of Moab was reeling. The Grand County Sheriff's Office tried to calm fears with a statement where they claimed there was no current danger to the public. But locals understandably weren't convinced. How could we be safe? One friend asked. If 2 women had just been executed in the mountains and no suspect was in custody. To many, it felt like officials were more concerned about protecting Moab's tourist industry than actually telling the truth and bringing safety to the population. And if you add to all of this the fact that the Gabby Petito case was erupting at the same time, speculation only grew louder. The timeline was impossible to ignore. On August the 12th, Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie were stopped by Moab police outside the Moonflower Co-op, the place where Kylan worked. Then the very next day, on August the 13th, Kylan and Crystal were last seen at Woody's Tavern, and then just 5 days later, August the 18th, their bodies were discovered in the LaSalle Mountains. For many, understandably, this felt like too much of a coincidence, and even police admitted that they couldn't rule out a connection. But eventually, authorities confirmed what some had feared, and that others had doubted. These 2 tragedies were completely separate. Gabby's demise was tied to Brian Laundrie, and they determined that Kylan and Crystal's case was tied to someone else.
And he assembled all these great clues, including a suspect list.
Now, Jason Jensen, a private investigator, is involved, trying to build on the information Sean Paul compiled.
How many people are you looking at right now?
Our list is roughly 17.
That list is of people who might fit the profile of a person of interest. But since all of the physical evidence is in the possession of law enforcement, he's having to take a different approach.
This is where Crystal and Kylan camped.
He recently visited the site where Kylan and Crystal were found.
What we're hoping for is that satellite imagery will identify the color of a car that was parked next to Kylan and Crystal's camp, so that we got a color, and hopefully if it's clear enough imagery, we might be able to get a sky view and discern what the make and model might be.
Next, another challenge. He's hoping that someone comes forward with dash cam video that could show more about the vehicle.
The video's out there, we just got to get the right person. Sadly, we're talking Moab, where you get visitors from all around the country and all around the world.
In March of 2022, a private investigator working with Sean Paul revealed that authorities had obtained a recording near the crime scene. The audio, picked up by surveillance equipment in the mountains, captured the sound of 2 gunshots. And, depending on who you asked, it also picked up screams. Police confirmed the gunshots, but refused to verify if they were screams or not. The timestamp on the footage was August the 14th, 2021 at 11:35 a.m., the morning after Kylan and Crystal were last seen alive. So if that timeline was accurate, it would mean that the couple had survived the night of the 13th, only to meet their end the very next morning. So it seems like someone had stalked them, had waited, and then struck in broad daylight. At this point, investigators believed they were dealing with a local, someone who must have known the area, someone who could blend into Moab's transient population, and eventually the pieces would come together. A man, a drifter, a co-worker, someone with anger problems and very dark thoughts. Someone who, according to police, had been hiding in plain sight all along. From the moment that the crime scene was first secured, investigators knew that this case would be difficult. 2 victims, multiple blasts, no obvious motive. And in a small town like Moab, rumours travelled faster than facts. The Grand County Sheriff's Office quickly reached out for help. The FBI, the Utah State Bureau of Investigation, and even the US Forest Service now all joined together in the search for answers. But even with federal resources, the trail was frustratingly cold. Investigators started with the hard evidence at hand. The rare ammunition, the Hornady critical defense rounds, was something that stood out immediately. Ballistics experts narrowed down the possible weapons to 2 Glock models, a Glock 17 or Glock 19, both being 9mm. It was a clue, but without a suspect, it meant very little. They pulled cell tower data from Jimmy Keene Flats, just miles from the campsite, between August the 13th and August the 15th. Every single phone that pinged within a 2-mile radius was logged. The hope was that somewhere in that list of numbers, they would find the perpetrator's device. But the results were inconclusive. Too many people had passed through the mountains on that weekend. For the families, the wait was unbearable. Kylan's father poured his grief into the public eye. He posted raw updates online, sharing his heartbreak, his frustration, and his determination to find answers. He even set up what he called a clue booth in Swanee City Park. This was a folding table covered in photos of the girls, note cards, and a box for anonymous tips. Every day he sat there. Locals described him as relentless, as looking haunted, like a man frozen in grief. Over time, he did gather nearly 50 tips. Some of them seemed credible, others were just desperate speculation, but still they brought no solid leads.
Sean Paul Schulte says it's hard not to consider the kind of attention that Gabby Petito's case got when compared with that of his daughter, Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner. And he's asking people to remember that their killer is still out there. For the past 3 weeks, Sean Paul Schulte has been right here.
There's a spot where I would sit and wait for the girls. They'd come around the corner on the Harley and come rolling up.
A sentimental spot at Swanee City Park where he's maintained a booth for collecting tips from the community.
These clues are time sensitive, and now so much time has gone by.
And while Petito's case grabbed so much more attention, he doesn't begrudge it. He just believes other cases like his daughter's need that same focus.
I know what it's like to have someone missing, and I know what it's like to not have closure yet. So I really feel for Gabby's family. If anybody saw anything there, a vehicle, a description of a person with a dog, a weirdo with a gun, whatever it is.
Schulte says dozens of people have brought him clues, and through his time here in town, he's seen how much Kylan and Crystal were loved.
The town cherished those girls.
Cindy Sue Hunter, the friend who had found the bodies, was equally as vocal. On social media, she challenged police statements. She expressed frustration at the slow progress, and she warned others to stay cautious regardless of what authorities said. She feared that the murderer could still be hiding in the mountains, and that they were now just waiting for their next opportunity. At the same time, a GoFundMe campaign organised by Bridget Calvert and Kevin Schulte raised around $40,000 for funeral costs. Donations poured in from friends, strangers, and people that were moved by the couple's story. And now that the spotlight was shining firmly on Moab, it would attract some strange celebrity attention.
An unsolved murder in Moab has captured the attention of Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Yeah, Crystal Turner and Kylan Schulte were both found shot and killed last August. News specialist Morgan Wolf spoke with Dog in Moab tonight and why he's confident he will find the killer.
It's been too quiet in Moab.
He did it in daylight. Someone heard or seen something.
That's why someone with a loud bark is here to try and solve the murder of Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner.
We've all missed something. There's something big that we're missing here. Yeah.
Kylan's dad has been actively trying to solve this case. His private investigator and him worked to get Dog the Bounty Hunter involved.
Hopefully, Dog shakes a tree and a really rotten apple falls out.
Stay on it till we catch him.
Kylan's dad said the area where the couple was found murdered up in the LaSalle Mountains is an area where they camped on and off for about 3 years, and Dog the Bounty Hunter went there himself.
You have to drive quite a while. If you're going to go down there, to do that, you're going to be spotted coming in and out.
The Grand County Sheriff's Office corrected the original timeline of these crimes. They believe the women were shot around 11:30 in the morning on August 14th. There's a $20,000 reward for any information that leads to an arrest.
Snitching, this is not a snitch thing. You'll actually be, in God's eyes, condemned if you know who did it and don't tell.
After 9 months, family, friends, and the community hope that Dog can sniff out the person who did this.
Be hopeful that they can catch this guy, and then Moab can kind of say, oh man, we feel safe again now. Let's go back up on our mountain.
In Moab, Morgan Wolf, KSL 5 News.
In May of 2022, Dog the Bounty Hunter rolled into town with a camera crew. He promised to flush out the killer. Whoever did this, he told reporters, we're coming for you. And for a moment, his presence stirred up some hope. But law enforcement basically ignored him. And within weeks, without any progress or much attention, he left Moab. And I know it's not funny really, but it did make me chuckle. Just how the police were like, Dog, no. And so the cameras moved on, but the grief would stay behind. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, investigators were pressing forward quietly. The one main detail that kept resurfacing was the creeper dude that Kylan and Crystal had mentioned so many times. Was he a real suspect in the case though? Or was he just an eerie red herring?
The Grand County Sheriff's Office has indicated there are multiple persons of interest, and this search warrant is giving us the first look at the type of evidence investigators are looking at. Hours before police found the couple, a Grand County Sheriff's deputy described making a traffic stop on someone with an Ohio license plate. They said he was so unnerving that the veteran law enforcement officer decided not to write the speeding ticket because he did not want to take his eyes off of him. Later on, when investigators interviewed the man, he told deputies he had seen the couple before and that he did not kill them, but he was not able to account for his whereabouts and would answer questions in non-committal ways. Eventually, deputies found a jacket that may have blood evidence on it around the area where this man said he was sleeping. According to the search warrant, investigators said they were looking for guns, ammunition, gloves, or evidence. All they took were 2 cloth hats and a long-sleeve shirt. Sometimes police and prosecutors ask a judge to keep these types of search warrants sealed because they're worried it would harm an ongoing investigation. That has not happened in this case. Right now, we are not identifying the man because the Grand County Sheriff's Office has not officially named him as a suspect. Reporting in studio tonight, Adam Herbets, Fox 13 News, Utah.
Detectives revisited co-workers at McDonald's where Crystal had worked, and that's when a name surfaced: Adam Pinkowicz. Adam was a drifter. He lived out of his car, just like many seasonal workers in Moab did. He had a reputation for being strange, for being quick-tempered, and for being hostile. Co-workers said that he once flew into a rage when he was told to work faster, that he had threatened a manager, that he had made homophobic remarks. One incident stood out in particular. Crystal had come into McDonald's on her day off in order to make sandwiches for herself and Kylan, something that employees often did. But when Adam saw her behind the counter, not in uniform, he snapped. He loudly complained that she wasn't supposed to be back there. Co-workers remembered how bizarrely angry he was over something so trivial, and it was not long after that incident that Kylan and Crystal disappeared. And even stranger still, Adam never returned to work. He didn't even collect his last paycheck. Instead, he simply vanished. But was this just a strange coincidence in an already strange case? It wouldn't be the first time that stars aligned only to be nothing at all. As detectives dug deeper though, the picture darkened. Adam owned a black Toyota Yaris, a car later spotted on surveillance, driving down the LaSalle Loop Road the very day after the murders. He'd also purchased a Glock 19 in 2019, one of the exact models that police believed could have been used, and there was also evidence that he had once bought Hornady ammunition, the unusual kind of ammunition that was now stuck in the mind of investigators, the same kind that was used on Kylan and Crystal. By May of 2022, investigators were thinking, maybe this is not just a coincidence after all, and they now grew confident that they at least needed to speak to Adam. So the creeper dude wasn't just a rumor, he wasn't just paranoia, he was a real man, and his name was Adam Pinkowicz. But there was one problem: Adam wasn't in Moab anymore. By spring of 2022, investigators had built a mountain of circumstantial evidence against Adam Pinkowicz, the angry co-worker, the drifter with the black Toyota Yaris, the man who had strangely vanished right after Kylan and Crystal's time was put to an abrupt end. But suspicion wasn't enough. They needed something that tied him directly to the crime. But all too often, things just aren't that simple. But would investigators be luckier this time? In Iowa, nearly 1,000 miles from Moab, detectives tracked down a man that Adam had been dating. When they knocked on his door, he didn't look surprised. In fact, investigators later said, he knew why we were there. What he told them confirmed their worst fears. He said that Adam had confessed to him. He told his partner in chilling detail that he had in fact shot 2 women in Utah. He even described moving their bodies after ending them, a fact that hadn't ever been released to the public. That detail now convinced detectives that the confession was real. No one outside of the investigation could have known this. When asked why, Adam reportedly said it was because he had worked with one of them, Crystal to be precise, and he didn't like her. He called her bossy. Police would later discover darker writings on his phone, notes about wanting to violate and end people, obsessions with violent behavior, anger towards women, minorities, and his managers. It painted a picture not just of a man with a grudge, but a man spiraling into violent fantasy. Investigators now pieced together his movements. August the 13th, 2021, Adam was seen buying groceries in Moab. That same afternoon, witnesses reported a creeper dude unpacking groceries at a campsite near Kylan and Crystal. And then, remember, August the 14th, 2021 at 11:35 a.m., surveillance equipment in the mountains captured the sound of gunfire and screams. Roughly an hour later, a black Toyota Yaris was seen driving down the LaSalle Loop Road, which it turns out was Adam's car. After the attack, Adam switched off his phone. He then drove to Colorado and then on to Iowa. September the 24th, 2021, 6 weeks after the event, Adam checked into a motel in Waterloo, Iowa. There, he put an end to his own time on this earth. The ammunition used, Hornady critical defense rounds, the very same that were used on Kylan and Crystal. By the time Moab authorities announced Adam as a prime suspect all the way in May of 2022, he was frustratingly already gone. This meant there would be no trial, no cross-examination, no day in court for Kylan and Crystal's families. But investigators said that the evidence was overwhelming. Adam had the motive, although not a good one, in that he had a festering grudge. He had the means and the rare ammo. He had the opportunity in the fact that he was camping in the same mountains at the same time. And of course, he confessed to his partner.
It seems more like there's no good reason for what happened. He's severely mental. Whether or not he was upset with the girls getting preferred treatment at work, I think that might be answered when we get the full evidence.
For Sean Paul Schulte, Kylan's father, the news was bittersweet. He hugged the sheriff outside of the courthouse with tears in his eyes, saying that he was relieved to finally know the truth. It was great to know he acted alone, Sean Paul told reporters. No one else will ever have to be hurt by this guy. Now the girls can rest in peace. But peace didn't come easily, because even with Adam identified, one question still lingered. Why go to such extreme measures over something so trivial? Why target these two women who harmed nobody, who were described as sunshine and kindness wrapped together? Investigators admitted they may never know for certain. Some believe Adam's rage was random. Some believe that Adam's rage was just down to poor mental health. Others believe that it really was because of that work-based resentment. But in the notes in his phone, Adam had written about killing as being a constant thought in his mind, like it was something inevitable, like he was just waiting for an opportunity. And when he saw Kylan and Crystal openly in love, camping freely in the mountains, something inside him snapped. By December of 2022, the case was officially closed. The Grand County Sheriff's Office stood by their findings. Adam Pinkowicz was the killer. But in Moab and across the country, people were still left unsettled. Because if Kylan and Crystal could be hunted in a place that they loved, what did that mean for others who wanted to live the same peaceful lifestyle? When the case closed in late 2022, Moab did try to move on, but the shadow of Kylan and Crystal's passings, it still lingers in the LaSalle Mountains. Because even with the answers, something about this case does feel unfinished. There was no trial, no guilty verdict, no moment where the killer was forced to face exactly what he'd done. Instead, Adam Pinkowicz left behind violent notes and an unfinished confession. Justice in this case was merely paperwork. And that's something that doesn't feel like enough. The setting of the case only deepens the unease. The LaSalles, a place the couple saw as a sanctuary, would actually become the backdrop of their final moments. I think when you look at a case like Kylan and Crystal's, and then you compare it to the media attention that Gabby Petito's case got, we do have to realise that not all victims are treated equally, even though the people that they left behind love them just as much. Kylan's father launched the Sunny Rose Housing Foundation, named after the couple's favourite flowers, to give Moab's workers the safe homes his daughter never had.
Frozen in time, that's how Sean Paul Schulte, Kylan's dad, explains how the past year and a half has been for him while he was trying to get answers about what happened to his girls. But now, after the case is closed, he feels like he can finally move on with his life, carrying on their legacy.
Shackles and the weights and all the binding that's been on me for a year and a half has all been lifted.
On Thursday, officials presented their findings and say Adam Pinkowicz murdered them and closed the case.
Them closing the case with such a plethora of evidence is worth celebrating. I'm excited to start my life again.
Sean Paul says watching the briefing where officials explained what happened to the girls did give him the closure he needed.
Just one thing after another was, oh my God, they have that. Oh my God, they have oh my God, they got the receipt from the gun. I mean, it was just one thing after another, just built up to this really super euphoric feeling of just elation with the facts that I didn't even know they were shot in the tent.
He says initially he was frustrated with how the investigation was handled.
Why are you not telling me this person's a suspect? That person's not a suspect. We have this evidence. We have that evidence. Sean Paul, you're a parent. You're going to go online and blab this stuff all over the internet.
He understood why it happened that way, but wishes it were handled differently.
They could do a better job helping you, comforting you, communicating to you, instead of being standoffish to you.
And now he can focus on his family, raise his younger kids, and move forward.
I want them to see our family celebrating that this case is closed. I want the littles to see a little bit of glimmer in their dad's eye. Maybe hear him laugh, maybe hear him play his guitar.
Sean Paul says along with starting a new chapter of his life, his goal is to help raise awareness and share a roadmap so other people who lose a loved one know how to navigate this process.
And thankfully, pet rabbit Ruth survived the campsite, frightened but alive. To friends, Ruth became a symbol of the couple's spirit, fragile but enduring, and she's still going strong. Today, people remember the light, Kylan's laugh, Crystal's protectiveness, the way they always held hands. They were sunshine, when friends said. They were love, they were pure light. Two people who embodied joy, silenced by someone who embodied rage and evil. If any of us are ever lucky enough to drive the LaSalle Loop Road, you'll pass aspens, creeks, and fresh, untouched mountain air. But for those who know this story, that landscape will now feel different, because somewhere in those trees, the final chapter of Kylan and Crystal's love story was written. And it is a reminder that even the most beautiful places, they can hide unspeakable darkness.